This is Ocean Robbins, and I am so excited that in a moment we are going to begin day 2 of the Food Revolution Summit. We'll be starting with Dr. Kelly Turner in about 4 minutes. You're one of more than 220,000 people who are participating in this summit and who are taking a stand for healthy, sustainable, humane, and delicious food. If you're interested in your health, if you want to make this world a better place, if you want to learn how to make food choices that optimize your wellness, you're in the right place. Again, we're going to be starting today's summit, day 2 in the Food Revolution Summit, with Dr. Kelly Turner in about 4 minutes. Yesterday, we heard some profound presentations from Dr. Michael Greger, Chris Carr, and Dan Buettner. And we've received thousands of enthusiastic emails and comments. Martha Argyros wrote, "Today I sit listening to this Food Revolution Summit while I'm in my kitchen lab, preparing the delicious nutrients that will sustain my body, health, and I'm only at the beginning of this new lifestyle journey, which I never thought I would love so much. My goal is to learn and experience this change and to find a beautiful way to help others break their chains." Thank you, Martha. There is so much in that message. I love that you refer to your kitchen as a lab, because what we're learning is that food really is medicine. It's the foundation of health. And I love your goal to experience this change and to find a beautiful way to help others to break their chains. You know, there's the saying that a person with their health has many dreams. A person without their health has but one dream. The fact is that when we don't have our health, hardly anything else matters. And so when we use food as the foundation of health, then our whole lives change. A whole world of possibilities opens up. And that, of course, is why we're here. We heard from Anna Manarino, who said, "I have been waiting for this kind of vital information. I'm a widow with 2 teenage daughters. I have changed my eating and diet because I have serious health issues. I got one of my daughters embarking on my change of eating journey, and we both are following your program. God bless you, and thank you for sharing your healthy wisdom with the whole world." Well, thank you, Anna. We're so grateful that you're with us and that you're bringing your daughters along with you. If you just joined us, we're going to be starting day 2 in the Food Revolution Summit in about 2 minutes with an interview with Dr. Kelly Turner. This is Ocean Robbins sharing some welcoming words with you. We heard from Corrine Bernard yesterday, who said, "This is my second Food Revolution Summit. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm a dedicated primary care doctor in the United Kingdom, in action to plant seeds of health and well-being in all areas amongst many. I appreciate that you not only are aligned to food, but to compassion and spirit. That makes a big difference. This summit not only confirms and supports my personal goals for my own health, but also encourages me energetically as I see the hope and the huge response. This is really going somewhere. Thanks for the energy and knowledge injection. Our joined forces of listeners, shakers, and makers, their present actions are going to help empower people towards our planet's health. Baby steps and big steps to all of us. Love to you all." Thank you, Karen. We truly are creating powerful change in this world. You know, as you listen to today's presentations, which will start in about a minute, I want to invite you to think about what this information means to you, and also about who you might want to share it with. Because if each one of us reaches just 10 people, then the 220,000 people in this summit will actually reach more than 2 million. And just think what kind of impact we can have. If you just joined us, this is Ocean Robbins, and I'm sharing a few welcoming words. We're going to be starting day 2 in the Food Revolution Summit very soon. Today's topic is preventing and beating cancer, stunning breakthroughs for lasting wellness. In a few moments, you'll hear us on the line with Dr. Kelly Turner. At the top of the next hour, you'll hear us on the line with Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Top of the hour after that with Dr. William Lee. After each interview, I'll be on the line to bring you my top takeaways and reflections, and to share in questions and answers and give some bonus tools and resources. You're going to hear us now, my dad and colleague John Robbins, interviewing Dr. Kelly Turner. Here we go. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins, in welcoming our guest, Dr. Kelly Turner. Dr. Kelly Turner is the New York Times best-selling author of Radical Remission: Surviving Cancer Against All Odds. She studied more than 1,500 cases of people who have defied a serious or even terminal cancer diagnosis with a complete reversal of the disease. Dr. Turner has found 9 key factors that nearly every radical remission survivor she has studied have in common. And now she's passionate about sharing these factors with the world. She's recently adapted her best-selling book into a fictional feature-length screenplay, and she's developing a 9-part docuseries based on her research. Dr. Turner is also the founder of the Radical Remission Project, which is a research website that continues to document and study new cases of radical remissions and to share Dr. Turner's powerful discoveries with the world. So now, Kelly, my dad and I are so grateful to you for your bold leadership and for all your brilliant work, and we're excited to have this time with you. And now for this interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, Ocean, and thank you, Kelly, for being with us today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm so honored to be part of the Food Revolution Summit and to be speaking with you both today.
Well, we are honored to have you. A lot of us have heard perhaps anecdotal stories about someone who had advanced cancer and tried all that conventional medicine had to offer. They underwent chemo and surgery, but nothing really worked. They were sent home to die. And then some years later, they saunter back to their doctor's office healthy and cancer-free. You've now studied, I think, several thousand cases by now of what you call radical remission. These are people who've really beaten the odds. Can you tell us, to begin with, why you began this work and what you originally hoped to accomplish?
Definitely. I began the work because I realized they weren't just anecdotes. They're anecdotes when you hear it once or twice, but when you go home and search through PubMed and see that there are over 1,000 of these cases published in medical journals, verified by doctors, written by doctors, then you're like, wait, these aren't anecdotes. These aren't just happening, every once in a blue moon. This is actually happening in the thousands, and yet we're not looking at them. So what really got me into the work, I was a counselor for cancer patients. That was my career. I got my master's in counseling specifically to help cancer patients, and that's what I was doing. And it was great, and it felt like very meaningful work. But most of my patients were dying, to be frank. The unit that I was on was dealing with very advanced cases, and many of them were in the ICU. And I was going to funerals every other week. And when I came across this case of radical remission, and then later that night found that there were over 1,000 of them, I said, okay, wait, I'm counseling people every day who are dying, and you're telling me there's 1,500 people over here who've miraculously healed, and we're gonna leave it at that? We're just gonna ignore that? We're gonna let that one slide? And I was like, I don't think so. So I ended up going back for my Ph.D. specifically to study these cases that no one was really studying. So that was how it all began.
We in Western medicine, we tend to be interested in pathology. We study the sick people and the diseases. We don't tend to look at people who are functioning optimally, who are exemplars of radiant and vibrant health. They just kind of are off the radar of Western medicine. And similarly, when people heal from cancer, there's some kind of a reluctance to study the phenomena. I can't explain it totally, but I think physicians can't explain this phenomena from their frame of reference. It just doesn't make sense according to the Western medical model that they're entrained in. But I keep wondering why no one else, up until now anyway, has undertaken a serious scientific effort to describe and to understand these cases of radical remission, and perhaps even more importantly, to find out what they have in common. It seems like such an important thing to do.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more, which is why I've spent the last 12 years dedicating my life to it. I agonize over this question. Why am I the first one to look deeply into these cases? And I think you have the answer, which is I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical doctor. I did not have to put aside 10 years of indoctrinated medical training in order to simply, from a very blank slate way, ask these people how they got well. I didn't have to push aside my beliefs. I was just able to go in as a counselor and say, tell me everything. And that allowed me to be non threatening to them. It allowed me to not feel threatened by what they were telling me. So I think it was just the right time and the right person, I guess, who wasn't a medical doctor, because most medical doctors that I've met, first of all, they've all been very appreciative of my work, which is great. I always say, I always joke, I was expecting pitchforks and I got thank you notes. But you're exactly right, John. They call it a spontaneous remission because that's their term. Because in Western medicine, there's no logical explanation for it. So therefore, it must be spontaneous. It must be a random stroke of luck. I don't believe that anything in this universe is spontaneous, and that's why I dug deeper into these cases. If you ask the people themselves, and by the way, most of their doctors unfortunately never asked these people what they did to get well. If you actually sit and ask them, it's not spontaneous at all. They worked really hard to change their diet, to change their life inside out. And so yeah, it's not something that's taught in medical school. It's outside of the current medical paradigm.
Most of the people I've known who have healed from cancer, despite being told their odds of recovery were poor, have worked at it, and they're
Mm.
still working at it after many years. Is that why you use the term radical remission instead of spontaneous remission?
That's exactly why. Yeah. I started off calling it spontaneous remission because that's what it was called in the medical literature. And then about halfway through my dissertation research, I realized, you know what? Every single person that I've studied so far hates that term and, in fact, is offended by it because they say, I worked my tail off to get well, and those changes that I made are permanent. I'm still working that hard. Some of them do sort of ease back on the diet and the supplements a little bit from when, during the really acute phase. But this is a lifestyle change that's permanent for them. So absolutely, they make a radical 180 shift in so many areas of their life. And these changes aren't small, they're big, right? So they're, they're big radical changes that in my mind lead to a radical result. So it just seemed like a more appropriate word to describe it. Spontaneous means, oh, all that work you did didn't contribute to it. This was just luck. And um, you know, once you interview a couple hundred people who don't attribute their remission to luck whatsoever, but instead attribute it to hard work, I just felt compelled that we really need to change that term. Spontaneous is just not it's not respectful of what they're doing.
No, it's not. And of the dramatic changes that they often make and the willpower and also surrender that's involved, it's a courageous thing. I know if I had cancer, I would want to read as many radical remission stories as I could because they'd be telling me what's possible. I wouldn't be reading fantasies. I'd be reading true stories that actually happened to real people. And as I understand you, Kelly, this is a central thesis of your work that radical remissions really do happen. They are a fact.
Yes, they are a fact. Everyone says, "Why aren't you worried about raising false hope?" And I always say, well, it's only false hope if it's false, right? If these people are
Exactly.
lying,
Yes.
then okay, you can accuse me of raising false hope. But these people exist. They really had cancer. It's been documented, and they're really alive and well now after their doctors told them they had 3 months to live. So there's nothing false about them. What becomes, the issue of false hope is if you say, oh, if you do what these people did, then you're guaranteed to cure your cancer. That we obviously can't say. We won't be able to say that until we run multiple clinical trials, which will take 10 to 20 years and tens of millions of dollars. So we need to be careful, what we're promising people. But these people exist, and they exist in the thousands. If not, who knows? I mean, these cases are very underreported, so it's very hard to know how often they're happening. But my estimate is that for every case that's published in a medical journal, there are 100 more that are unpublished.
Which would mean there are hundreds of thousands of these.
That would be my estimate.
I'm thinking back to the 1980s, maybe, at a time when there was a lot of discussion about a so-called cancer personality. The belief
Hmm.
then, and perhaps to some extent still, was that people who are overly passive, who don't stand up for themselves, who are always trying to please others, are more likely to develop cancer. Now, I've seen more recent studies that all seem to indicate that it is feeling helpless that weakens the immune system. It's feeling helpless that decreases survival time in cancer patients. And it's feeling helpless, not being focused on pleasing others, that increases the risk of cancer. Kelly, if it is feeling helpless, that does increase your risk for cancer. And if it is feeling helpless, that reduces your chances of surviving cancer. Then I want to ask, what might the opposite, what might taking control of your cancer treatment do for someone with cancer?
Well, that is a fantastic question. And by the way, you're spot on with that research. The cancer personality research got overturned, but the shining thread of truth that was hidden in that research was this idea of feeling helpless. And not surprisingly, one of the common fact, traits or healing factors among radical remission survivors is the opposite of helpless. It's taking control, taking ownership over your health. And there aren't a lot of studies on that. Like you said, the medical field is focused on studying people when people get sick or what goes wrong. So there aren't tons and tons of studies out there on people who take control or try to be more empowered in their healthcare. But there have been a few, and one of them looked at stage 4 breast cancer patients, and they were looking at the ones who were in a group therapy um, setting, and the ones who did the homework that was assigned, the ones who were most active, not just in the group setting in terms of talking and sharing and listening, but really doing the homework, the emotional homework that was assigned. Those women lived significantly longer than the ones who weren't doing the work, who weren't taking control like that. So taking control, I think, if we continue to do research on this personality trait of, I won't say taking control because we never really have control over everything, but taking an empowered position towards your life and towards your health, we're going to find incredible results that come out of that research because it just activates the immune system when you don't feel helpless.
Yes, when you feel that your choices matter, that the decisions you make matter, that you really have a say in how this all goes and how it all comes out, it would seem to me that that would activate healing powers within a person with cancer and highly increase their odds of not just survival, but of thriving and of growing out of it, of really healing the disease.
Yeah, exactly. And then we can get into the biology of it if you want, which is when you feel empowered and you feel like there's something you can do to help yourself, you're getting out of the stress response and into, and actually, you're more excited, but you're also more kind of relaxed. You don't feel threatened. So you're moving into the parasympathetic operating system of your nervous system, which releases the serotonin and the relaxin and the oxytocin, and that's just like super fuel. That's like gasoline for your immune system. That just lights up your white blood cells. So that's the chemical explanation. Um, but there have been other researchers who've looked at this. Aaron Antonovsky, who is one of the foremost sociology researchers, really informed my dissertation research because he looked at Holocaust survivors and he looked at them, 40 years later in the 80s, and he said, let's look at Holocaust survivors, right? People have gone through one of the most terrible things in our human history. Which ones are doing well? How could you possibly be doing well after that? And one of he found some psychological traits that were common among these people who were doing well after such horrific events. And one of them was this idea of manageability, of feeling like life your life situation was manageable. And they reported even feeling that things were manageable in the camps. Not manageable like, oh, I can handle this no problem, but they reduced their world down to, okay, I can, if I listen to the guard this way, and if I move the things over here and do exactly as they say, then I won't get in trouble and I won't get sent over here. So they found a way even to manage the hell that they were in and to feel like they had some control over their life. Um, and that's what we're finding now in radical remission survivors is even when you're in the midst of a hellish stage 4 diagnosis, if you feel like, okay, the food that I put into my mouth can make me feel a little bit better today, that's something. That's something to make you feel like you're not just completely powerless. And powerlessness is something I think we're all feeling. A lot of us are feeling these days, not related to health, but obviously the political climate. So it's an important thing to realize that feeling powerless is detrimental to your health, and feeling like you can take some sort of action that could make a difference is crucial to your immune system.
You mentioned the food we eat. We're learning more every day about the power of a whole foods, plant strong diet to prevent and to reverse many, indeed most of the common diseases of our time, including cancer.
Hmm.
Kelly, have you seen any consistency in the kinds of dietary changes the people you've studied have made? I mean, are there specific dietary changes that these people have all or mostly all tended to make?
Yes and no. Yes, generally, and no, specifically. What I mean by that is, I'm studying cancer patients from all walks of life with all types of cancer, men, women, young, old, you name it. So when you look at the individual cases of radical remission, everybody's diet varies. Some people are raw vegan, some people are juicing only vegetables, some people are ketogenic, macrobiotic, paleo, there's all different flavors under the sun. So when I was looking for a commonality, around this eating thing, I really had to sort of zoom out because not everybody was doing raw, not everybody was juicing. But if I zoomed out and took a broader look, then I started to see some trends. So the general trends are that, and you probably could have guessed this one from a mile away, is that everyone's eating significantly more vegetables, significantly more vegetables. Um, so that's the big one. And what they're doing, because they're eating so many more vegetables, is they're taking away things like meat, wheat, sweets, and dairy. And when I say wheat, I mean like gluten. So they're greatly increasing their fruits and vegetables while reducing or eliminating, sometimes even entirely, meat, gluten, sugar, and dairy. Um, the other two sort of common general trends that we see in radical remission survivors are that they're trying their hardest, as much as their wallet will allow, to eat organically, and they're also drinking filtered water. So those are the trends that we're seeing. Like I said, within that, everybody's diet is slightly different. Some people can, tolerate a little bit of, really clean, hormone-free dairy. Some people can't. Some people can tolerate a little bit of gluten. Other people can't. So really on a case-by-case basis, it varies down at that specific level. But the general trends, yeah, absolutely, across the board. Eat more vegetables. It's pretty easy.
You know, I've always been impressed by our metabolic individuality and our biochemical individuality, so it doesn't surprise me at all that there would be some variations here. But what I'm hearing as the common themes are more vegetables and less meat, gluten, dairy, sugar, and also an emphasis, when possible, on organic foods and on drinking filtered water.
Hmm.
And
Right.
when you mentioned sugar, people are finding benefit to healing their cancers from greatly reducing the amount of sugar in their diet. That doesn't really surprise me. I don't think it would surprise any of us. But I found myself thinking about the fact that cancer cells are notorious for being obligate glucose metabolizers, which means they're sugar feeders.
Hmm. Yeah, they metabolize sugar at a rate of up to 50 times that of a normal cell. And so everyone says, are you saying sugar causes cancer? And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm saying. We are still trying to figure out what causes cancer. It's most likely mitochondria failing in the cell. Well, the mitochondria are what are in charge of the cell breathing with oxygen. So if the mitochondria fail, your healthy cell, which is now unhealthy because the mitochondria failed, has to breathe in a different way. And so it starts breathing anaerobically, meaning without oxygen, and it basically breathes sugar. So in order to get that ATP, in order to get that energy, it suddenly needs to consume tons and tons of sugar in order to convert that into energy. So, people say, oh, well, you think sugar causes cancer. I'm like, no, no, no. We don't know that. We may find out that a high sugar diet leads to inflammation in the body, which encourages cancerous growth. But that we can't say for sure. What we know for sure is that regardless of how a cell became cancerous, once it's behaving in a cancerous manner, it is gobbling up sugar like a Pac-Man. And so to try to shut down that breathing through sugar activity that it's going through, reducing sugars seems to make a lot of logical sense. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the sugars found in fruit. And John, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on fruit, because among radical remission survivors, I've seen both sides of that spectrum. I've seen some radical remission survivors not have any fruit except maybe some really dark berries. And then I've seen other radical remission survivors go on like a fruit only diet for 40 days and get well that way. So, again, that goes back to the individuality of what your particular body might need. But what are your thoughts, John, on the sugar in fruit?
Well, I do have a lot of respect, as we've both been mentioning, for individuality and for each of us to tune into our own bodies and, frankly, to our soul contract with life to determine, to get the guidance from within ourselves, our inner wisdom, as to how to proceed. In general, I think there's a very big difference between the sugar rather, that's found in whole fruits and the sugar that's extracted from beets or cane that's grown for sugar, or from corn and made into high fructose corn syrup. And I think eating fruits, for most people, whole fruits, for most people, particularly berries, by the way, have a wonderful place in an optimally healthy diet and in a cancer healing or cancer preventing diet. And yet, if someone is guided from within themselves and feels really called to not eat any fruit or very little, say just berries, I would respect that. So that would be my answer to your question.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely. My PhD is not in nutrition. It's in the social sciences. So I'm not a nutritionist who knows the ins and outs of, fructose versus other types of glucose, that sort of thing. But the commonality is always vegetables, and then some people can do okay with fruit, and some people can't. And so I think that part is always, just like anything, it's worth figuring out what your body needs.
Yes. And when you extract, say, the juice from a fruit and you don't have the fiber, you lose some of
Right.
the orchestra. You just have a few of the instruments. And we tend to do that in our society. We extract things. We think we have found the critical ingredient in it, but really we lose the whole. And the whole
Yeah.
fruit, the whole foods orientation, and I'm not referring to the chain of markets here, but a whole foods diet instead of the processed foods and the isolated nutrients that we tend to consume. I think that's the direction of healing for many people. And it seems
Yeah.
to be that's what you're discovering with your radical remission studies. When you mentioned that many of your people were eating more vegetables and eating less meat and dairy products, I found myself remembering a study. It is the largest study ever performed on diet and bladder cancer. It comprised nearly 500,000 people. It was published in the International Journal of Cancer. The study found that an increase in animal protein consumption of just 3% was associated with a 15% increased risk of bladder cancer, while on the
Wow.
other hand, an increase in plant protein intake of only 2% was associated with a 23% decreased cancer risk. Rather staggering
Wow.
numbers.
Staggering. And now I can hear all the listeners being like, well, what's plant protein though? I thought I needed to eat meat to get protein, which of course isn't true. Um, there's no such thing as protein itself. There's just amino acids, and you need those 8 essential ones for your body to combine them and build muscle for you. And you can get those from plants, and very, very easily if you eat a wide variety of plants. So, wow, that's a stagger. I don't know if I'd heard that one. That must have been epidemiology, right? 500,000?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of studies that are finding similar trends. The American Institute for Cancer Research is widely considered one of the world's leading authorities on diet and cancer. In collaboration with its international affiliate, the World Cancer Research Fund, the Institute has produced a major international report, Food, Nutrition, and the Prevention of Cancer, A Global Perspective. This report analyzed more than 4,500 research studies. Its production involved the participation of more than 120 contributors and peer reviewers. It's a highly prestigious report, and it finds that 60 to 70% of all cancers can be prevented by staying physically active, not smoking, and most importantly, by following the report's number one dietary recommendation, which is, and I quote, choose predominantly plant-based diets, rich in a variety of vegetables and fruits, legumes, and minimally processed starchy foods. Mm-hmm. Now, it seems to me that the people you've been studying have very often chosen to shift their diets in accord with the very same dietary principles that the world's leading researchers on the diet-cancer connection have found to be crucial to preventing cancer in the first place. A whole foods diet, plant-strong diet filled with lots of fresh veggies, maybe some fruits, definitely seeds, nuts, and legumes, and very low in processed foods, and often very low in meat, dairy, and sugar. Kelly, do you think there's a lesson here for all of us?
Yes. I was going to say, you just quoted the big statistic about 70% of cancers are preventable if you would just live like this. I'm studying people who turn around cancer, from death's door by living like this. And then, some of the other great studies that I like to always bring up are the ones that are looking at cancer survivors, who then change their lifestyle and change what they're eating to more plant-based. And those who do that, who eat, 5 or more fruits and vegetables a day and exercise, live twice as long as other cancer survivors. So we're talking about, if you eat this way, you're going to prevent cancer. You could potentially heal cancer the way that radical remission survivors do, potentially. And you could, if you're a cancer survivor, you can reduce the risk of a recurrence. So yes, it's for everyone. It's absolutely for everyone. And this is how our great grandparents used to eat. We need to get back to our roots, pun intended. We need to get back to the roots of these plants and not be eating factory food, things that are made by machines.
I so agree, and I find it sad that today, even after receiving a cancer diagnosis, many people will still not, most of them will not make the dietary changes that could help them to heal, the ones we've been talking about. In most cases, they don't know. And in most cases, their doctors don't tell them how greatly a healthier lifestyle and a healthier diet could improve their survival chances. I'm thinking of a study right now of nearly 1,500 women who had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And the study found that those women, among those diagnosed with the cancer, who simply ate 5 or more servings of fruits and vegetables a day and walked 30 minutes a day, had only half the risk of dying from their cancer in the 2 years following diagnosis.
Yeah.
Kelly, there are countless studies like this. And yet, do you see something in the way the cancer establishment approaches the disease that makes people feel helpless and afraid rather than mobilized and committed?
Oh, yes. Um, these studies come out, and I feel like, unfortunately, the practicing oncologists, I don't know if they think that, oh, well, that has to do with long-term survival. That doesn't have to do with right now. I'm still every week hearing of someone who says, well, I'm getting chemo right now, and my oncologist said I can eat whatever I want, and if that's potato chips and ice cream to get me through, that's what I can do. And a part of me dies inside. Because that's just not what the research says. I mean, you just quoted that study. That I could give someone 20 more studies like that. We're not just talking about what to eat when you're cancer free, when you're, through your cancer journey and trying to prevent a recurrence, or whether you've never had cancer. We're talking about what you should eat if you are unfortunately diagnosed with cancer. It matters. It matters so much. We have studies upon studies upon studies that say this. You should not be eating, potato chips and ice cream to try to get through the nausea. There are plant-based, really incredible, healthy ways to get through the nausea and to keep your weight up, that don't involve, putting more food in your body that's not going to heal it. So it's frustrating because, people come home from the hospital out of surgery having eaten sloppy joes and hospital lasagna for 2 weeks, and then they're going to start chemo. So it's it's an uphill battle with the medical establishment. They really haven't connected the dots between these hundreds of very well produced studies and what they're advising their patients in the hospital and what they're serving them, right? Because often people are well, not often, but I'd say in half the cancer patients of people who are getting treated in the hospitals, they're starting with their surgery. So the very first thing they're getting is hospital food.
And the hospital food carries the authority of the medical system and of the hospital. It's whether or not it's intended to. The message is, this is the food we think you should be eating, and it's often Jello and processed stuff, and really it's not the food that people should be eating if they really want to get well.
Right, right.
I keep thinking about the powerlessness, the helplessness that a person who is resigned and doesn't feel that their choices matter, and feels that the doctor has all the power, they doesn't believe in their body's healing powers. And I'm thinking about how we learn to suppress our emotions, and in that disempower ourselves. Someone once said in a movie, "I can't express anger. I grow tumors instead." Kelly, do you think suppressing emotions can actually lead to cancer? And conversely, can releasing suppressed emotions actually sometimes help to heal cancer?
Well, the first part of your question, can it cause cancer? That's not part of my research. I don't look at what causes cancer. It's not that I'm not interested in it. It would require, a lot of different variables, and, perspective, double blind studies and that stuff to really try to see, can emotions cause cancer? Um, so cause aside, let's just talk about healing. One of the 9 most common factors that I found among radical remission survivors is releasing suppressed emotions. This came up not only among the survivors, but among their healers. So it was really interesting because in my research, I interviewed not just the people who got well, but the people they went to see to try to get well. These, Western medicine had given up on them. And so who did they go see? They went to see non-Western medicine doctors, healers, naturopaths, psychotherapists, you name it. And I was looking for common threads among the healers as well. Like, well, what are they all saying the same thing? And they were. The healers said, you must release any emotions you're holding on to. You must, in order for your body to operate properly, in order for things to flow. And I was thinking, okay, blood flow, oxygen flow. And they were like, no, 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 energy flow. They're like blood flow, yes, oxygen flow, but most importantly, energy flow. Because in a lot of these, alternative medicine systems, they talk about things like chi or prana, life force. as being integral to how we operate. And, we can feel it when we get angry and we have that knot in our stomach, right? And after you hold that knot in your stomach over, towards your ex-husband or towards your father or whatever, after a while, it just becomes normal and you forget that you're gripping something. And what they all said, the healer said, is that over time, if you're gripping, if you're holding on to anger or resentment or even grief, you're going to lead to a blockage, things sort of blocking up. And of course, that's what a tumor is. It's a buildup of cells that start getting in the way and blocking things. So it's really fascinating to hear that over and over again. One of the people I studied was named Joe. He's mentioned in chapter 5 of my book. He was diagnosed with stage 3C lung cancer. And sort of by happenstance, he ended up postponing his chemotherapy, which was supposed to start immediately because he wanted to take a trip. And his doctor said, "Okay, you can take your vacation that you had planned, but then you got to come back and start chemo." And during this vacation, he really had a sort of, very miraculous sort of awakening of possibility of healing. It's a crazy story. This fortune teller in Thailand stopped him on the street and said, "The doctors tell you you're going to die, but don't listen to them. You're going to live till you're 88." And he was like, "What? Did that just happen?" And so he went home and started looking into healing. And what he found is that he was carrying around all this anger towards God. And, we read so many stories of people who forgave their ex-husband or forgave their father who, molested them. And those are really concrete examples. But this was a really, for me, I was like, wow, even being angry at God, this, it's not a person who you can touch and feel. It's this force. Even that sort of anger held for years can hinder your immune system. And so for Joe, letting go of that anger and feeling accepted again by God, because he's a gay man, so he felt very rejected by the faith he was brought up in, which was Catholicism. So he had to, as part of his healing, find a way to let go of the anger, but also let go of the hurt and the rejection, and find a way to feel loved again by some sort of spiritual force. And by doing that, everything sort of relaxed in his body and things started flowing again, and the energy flowed and the love flowed again. And, this isn't typical. This doesn't happen every day, but he never needed chemo or surgery, and he's fine. So it's a huge part of health, is letting go of whatever we're gripping onto. We need to breathe. You can't really breathe unless you're relaxed and you've let go of things. So it's a powerful one.
I'm thinking as you tell the story about this guy, about a woman I know who could have been part of your study. She was diagnosed with stage 2 triple negative breast cancer, which has a very, very poor prognosis.
Yeah.
She went through a year of surgery and chemo and radiation, but her health was failing. Her oncologist suggested hospice care. And she went home and she made dramatic changes now, both in what she was eating. She shifted to a plant-strong whole foods diet. And in particular, she began eating a lot of dark green leafy veggies and flax seeds. And she also began, for maybe the first time in her life, to really address the feelings from her childhood, some anger she had at her father, dealing with some trauma that had occurred in her early sexual life. And she began to feel the anger that she felt about that and express it. And she felt enlivened by that. And her relationship to God changed. That's how she put it. Her relationship to the universe changed. So her relationship to her life changed in a dramatic sense. And she's now well and thriving. And she's been cancer-free for 8 years. And she continues to eat healthfully. She continues to be very serious about tuning into her feelings and expressing them in a positive way and releasing them. And I think about her, and I think about the man you just talked about, and I think about how many people there might be that we don't even know about who are doing similar things and getting similar results. And that makes me very grateful to you for your doing the work you've been doing.
Oh, well, thank you. It is an honor to meet people like the woman you're describing or like Joe, to sit across from someone who was basically told by someone very powerful in a white coat, this doesn't look good, or I'm sorry, you're going to die now. um, to put it, not so gently, and to then be sitting across from them and realize that was 7 years ago, and we're sitting here now having tea, and you're telling me how you overcame that. I mean, it's really incredible to meet these people and to know they exist, and they exist in the hundreds, if not thousands. Well, I mean, we know they exist in the thousands. Do they exist in tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands? This is what we need to know, right? And there's no way of tracking them. We have no way to track these people in the current cancer registry. It's. I mean, if I were political at all, I would go and try to fix the cancer registry system, because these people, if they do come back to their doctor, some of them don't because their doctor gave up on them. If they do come back, then the doctor puts in the computer that they're now in remission. But if they had had chemo, I don't care if it was 7 years ago, the chemo that failed, right, that then they were then sent home on hospice for, that remission is attributed to the chemo. It
Exactly.
actually improves
I
the statistics.
know.
It says that the chemo healed them, and it didn't.
Yes.
It was these 9 factors. It was the diet. It was the herbs. It was the releasing suppressed emotions and all the other things that they're doing to turn their immune system around. It all comes down to the immune system. Our spirits, our emotions, our diets are all intricately tied to our immune system, this incredible immune system that we were all born with. And unfortunately, that incredible, beautiful, amazing remission is now, the credit is given to the chemo that actually failed 7 years ago. So don't get me started on this one, John. I'll get too angry.
Well, I hear in common amongst the 9 factors, and that they help deepen people's spiritual connection. And I remember in your book you wrote about a study that found that beginning meditators changed their gene expression in a significantly health promoting way after just 8 weeks of regular meditation practice.
Just
Now,
8 weeks. I mean,
just 8
think
weeks.
about that.
Now,
Amazing.
if it's true that a spiritual practice like meditation can actually turn cancer protective genes on and turn cancer causing genes off, wouldn't that be incredible news for people who are carriers of known cancer promoting genes like the BRCA mutation in breast cancer?
Yes, yes. And this is, I'm sure you've had people on your summit talk about epigenetics before, but when it comes to not feeling helpless, this is one of the major ways that you cannot feel helpless, because we were all taught back in high school biology that your genes are your destiny, and you match it up, what you got from your mom, what you got from your dad, and whichever little box you ended up in, whatever combo you got is what you got, and that's it. You got to live with it. Well, genes have light switches on them. So yeah, you got those genes from your parents, but is it turned on or turned off? And if it was turned on in either of your parents, you were probably born with it turned on, right? We see this now in epigenetic studies. The mice, the mommy mice who have the obesity gene turned on, if they then reproduce, their baby mice are born with their obesity gene turned on. So these kids are born not only with the gene, but with the light switch turned on. But if you take that same obese mom, feed that mouse a different diet, a healthier diet, and get her gene to turn off. She doesn't necessarily need to, lose all the weight, but if you can just turn that gene off from this new diet, and then she has babies, baby mice, the mice will be born with it turned off. They will be born skinny mice. So it is so empowering, not just for yourself, that we have the ability in 8 short weeks to turn these light switches on or off, but that we can protect the future generations. For any of the people listening to this who are worried about, oh, well, I have cancer and I'm going to try to get through it, but I'm not going to have kids because I have the BRCA gene. And so, I don't want to pass that on to someone. Well, it doesn't really matter what you're passing on to them. It matters whether your light switches are on or off when you have children. And we can turn our light switches on or off on our genes in 8 weeks. I mean, how empowering is that? To me, it's the future of health medicine here, is understanding the power of epigenetics and that we can in with lifestyle changes, changing your diet radically, taking herbs and supplements to help balance your microbiome and doing all of the intense emotional work. 8 weeks you can change your life. I mean, that's power. That makes you feel the opposite of helpless.
Exactly. Yeah. Kelly, sometimes it takes a cancer diagnosis to wake someone up to the need to take charge of their lives and to do everything they can to reconnect with their spirits and their feelings and eat more healthfully and move toward optimal health in every way they can.
Mhm.
But as I've been listening to you today, I keep feeling how your work is also about how we all can live happy, healthy, fulfilling, and soulful lives. It seems to me that the people you've been studying really are teachers for all of us. And I want to tell you, it's been a great pleasure for me to talk with you today. And I want to thank you, of course, for your outstanding work and also very much for being with us today.
Oh, well, thank you for having me. And I agree. The radical remission survivors I study are indeed my teachers. And, if the statistics are currently true, 1 in 2 women will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime, 1 in 3 men. And we can actually change that. That's a terrible statistic. It's frightening. But we can change it right now. You cannot be that 1 in 3 or 1 in 2 by doing these lifestyle changes, right? That can prevent 70% of cancers. So it's exactly these people are teachers to me of how to live a life that never involves cancer, hopefully.
We've been talking here with Kelly Turner, New York Times bestselling author of Radical Remission, Surviving Cancer Against All Odds, and founder of the Radical Remission Project. Kelly, your work is taking what heretofore has appeared to be miraculous and making it accessible and even for many people attainable. You are offering hope and empowerment to millions. We want to thank you for your brilliant, penetrating research, for your insightful articulation, and of course for your partnership in the food revolution.
Well, you're welcome. It's been my pleasure, and I'm so excited to be a part of this.
Thank you so much to Dr. Kelly Turner and to my dad and colleague, John Robbins, for that incredibly powerful, empowering conversation. To express your opinions on what you've been hearing and to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments section at the bottom of our broadcasts page. Make sure to refresh the comments using the button that's provided there so you can see the most recent comments that have been submitted. Our next presentation will be an interview with Dr. Joel Fuhrman. It will start at the top of the next hour. In just a few minutes at 9 a.m. Pacific Time, noon Eastern, 4 p.m. GMT, followed by Dr. William Lee at the top of the hour after that. In Kelly Turner's research, she originally identified more than 75 factors that could be playing a role in cases of radical remission. But when she calculated the frequency of each of these factors, she found that 9 out of those 75 kept coming up again and again and again in almost every one of the interviews she conducted. Almost every person mentioned doing the same 9 things in order to help heal their cancer. And as it happens, those same 9 things, many of them have been proven to be correlated with helping to prevent cancer as well. So I want to go ahead and state again what these 9 key factors are that have been found in so many cases of radical remissions. They are radically changing your diet, taking control of your health, following your intuition, using herbs and supplements, releasing suppressed emotions, increasing positive emotions, embracing social support, deepening your spiritual connection, and having strong reasons for living. We can all learn a lot from that, can't we? And now I want to share and respond to a few of the comments that we've been receiving. We heard from Vicky Shayan Jones, who said, "Another benefit of cutting sugar and artificial sweeteners from my diet has been, after 32 years of severe disabling chronic nerve and back pain and damage, ruptured bulging discs, and treatments of all kinds, my pain has been cut nearly in half. Praise God for that. Wish I'd known this years ago. Well, thank you for sharing that, Vicki, and thank you for making the change. And I am so glad after 32 years of brutal pain, and my heart goes out to you in all of it, that you found some relief. We heard from Sherry McCorriston, who said, "Food is my medicine. As a longtime sufferer of depression, I know firsthand the amazing impact of radically changing the way I eat. I went from a junk food junkie to a healthy whole food junkie. Gone is the gluten, no more intestinal disruptions, no more refined sugar, goodbye to depression and anxiety, and adios to over 70 pounds of angry fat. Organic and green, so much better." Thank you, Sherry, for sharing this, and I am so glad to hear that you've released so much angry fat, that you've had such a change in your intestinal health, and your depression and anxiety is gone. Congratulations. You know, we hear these stories every day in the Food Revolution Network, and it always fills me with gratitude. It also kind of lights a fire in me, to be honest with you, because I want to share this with other people. You know, we all know people who are suffering right now with the toxic food culture that's all around us. And the fact is that we can participate in helping to improve their lives by sharing what we're learning. So I want to ask you, please, as you learn in this summit, as you engage, do so for you, absolutely, all the way. Put your own oxygen mask on first. But also keep thinking about the people you love. Who would benefit from this information? Who do you want to share it with? Tell them to go to foodrevolutionsummit.org and tune in. Or get the empowerment package and share the transcripts and the MP3s with them. Help spread this word, spread this information, because this world needs it and the people we love need it. We heard from Katie Majestic, who asked a question. She said, "When you reference sugar in relation to cancer, do you mean all sugar, including natural sources like dates, honey, pure maple syrup, etc.?" Well, Katie, here's my take here. The best sweeteners are whole foods in their natural state. This includes fruits, dates, and berries. They come with fiber, they come with vitamins and minerals, and they're often associated with positive health outcomes in medical studies. Not just neutral, but actually positive, beneficial results. But when you start refining and processing to make things sweeter and to remove the fiber and the vitamins and the minerals and the other natural components, then everything changes. So when you take the sap of a maple tree and you distill it hundreds and hundreds of times to make it maple syrup, or when you juice sugarcane and then dehydrate that juice to make sugar, or when you juice apples even to make apple juice, you're creating a product that has lost some or all of its original nutrients. You've removed the fiber that helps to slow down the rate of absorption, and you've created what is essentially, in many ways, an added sugar product. Now, not all added sugars are the same. For example, maple syrup or raw honey or dehydrated cane juice do have nutrients in them that you won't find in high fructose corn syrup or in genetically engineered beet sugar. And not all people have the same level of sensitivity. A lot of people can put a dash of maple syrup in their tea and not suffer any problems for it. But as a general guideline, my take on the medical research is that it guides us to want to eat more whole, real, natural foods and bring on the berries and the fruits. But in general, we're going to be healthier, it seems, if we steer clear of refined sweeteners. Merle Maples said, "I can't say how pleased I am to be able to listen to these sessions. I'm 75 and the only one left of my close connected family that hasn't passed with cancer. What used to be thought was whatever my family had, people would ask what type of cancer and what part of the body. Everyone just expected to get it. With my family, each passed with a different type of cancer throughout the body. I fight daily with what I eat, trying to break the cycle for my grandchildren. Thank you all very much for your work." Well, Merle, I'm so sorry to hear of all of your losses. You know, this is so personal, and we've all lost people we cherish. At the same time, I'm so glad that you're choosing a different path, that you're applying healthy eating principles, and that you're still with us. Bless you, and bless you for being there for your grandchildren. I know they're very lucky to have you. We heard from Beth Reese, who said, Kelly, I love your research and you are spot on. I was diagnosed with breast cancer in January, and my doctors refused to talk with me about how I can heal through nutrition. Their only guidance is to stay away from soy and vitamin C, and they said to eat whatever I need to put in my mouth to eat while in treatment. It's so depressing. Thank you, Kelly, for giving me hope that my doctors want nothing to do with. Well, Beth, I'm so touched that you're going through this, and our prayers go out to you in your healing journey, and we want to support you. And one of the ways we're going to support you is right now, you are this segment's Empowerment Package recipient. So we're going to be reaching out to you and giving you the Food Revolution Summit Empowerment Package because we want to help you on your healing journey. So you can listen to Kelly's interview again. You can click links to sources to find out more about studies from the transcript. You can have the MP3s and transcripts of the entire summit for life so you can listen as you're going through this process and participate in it, not just this week, but forever. And you can share it with the people that you love. And you'll also have all of the bonuses. So our team will be in touch with you, and we're so happy to share that with you. Congratulations, and I really, truly hope that it supports you on your healing journey. And congratulations also to many of the recent people who have been getting the empowerment package. In fact, all of them. Congratulations to Mary Ann from Texas, Betty from North Carolina, Brian from Tennessee, Denise from California, Marie France from Canada, Marion from Georgia, Donnell from Canada, Kevin from Tennessee, Ruthie from Alabama, Joy from Massachusetts, and everybody else who is stepping up and stepping forward and saying yes to your health. The empowerment package gives you the entire summit for life. And we are so thrilled to share it. And you know, one of the things I want to appreciate is everybody who's getting this package is investing in our mission. We love offering this summit completely for free, and it's available to everybody. And that's how more than 220,000 people are joining us right now to get this life-saving information. And we also couldn't do that if some people didn't step up to invest in our mission and support our work with the empowerment package. So when you do get the empowerment package, you're supporting the food revolution spreading through the world, and you're also taking a stand for your health and to be a change agent for the lives of the people you love. We heard from Kitty Whitney, who said so much excellent information here. Why don't doctors impress the need of healthy eating to be part of the patient's care plan? Maybe doctors should have a required education of nutrition. Not to be experts, but at least to advise and refer patients to professionals who can instruct them in a healthy eating plan. Well, yes, Kitty, I think it is so true. You know, we have a healthcare industry that for the most part acts as if food didn't matter. But we all know that food is the foundation of health. And I'm completely with you in this vision. We want doctors to be informed, and change is happening, but it's happening kind of slowly. You know, less than a third of the medical schools in the United States have a single required course in nutrition. The average medical doctor graduates medical school having received about 20 hours of nutritional education. And so we need to change this. One of the ways we're working to change this is by working on a petition to the National Board of Medical Examiners. We're going to be launching that campaign this year. We're calling on the National Board of Medical Examiners, which creates the tests that medical school students must pass in order to graduate medical school. They create those tests. Right now, those tests have virtually nothing about nutrition. So our thought is, if they included nutrition, then medical schools would have to teach nutrition in order for doctors to graduate. As you might imagine, medical schools teach to the test. So our campaign is to petition the National Board of Medical Examiners to highlight whole foods nutrition on those tests. We think this could make a powerful difference for the health of millions of people. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for engaging. And every time we talk to doctors, we can also be a living example of health. And speaking of which, we are about to hear from one of the foremost doctors in the world when it comes to empowering all of us with the power of nutrition to change our lives. Dr. Joel Fuhrman is one of the great leaders of our times. And now you're going to hear him on the line with us, interviewed by my dad and colleague, John Robbins. Here we go. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins, in welcoming our guest, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. Dr. Fuhrman is a board-certified family physician and a researcher who specializes in reversing disease through excellent nutrition. He's the million-copy New York Times best-selling author of Eat to Live, The End of Heart Disease, and many other books, and a wildly popular host of numerous PBS specials. Dr. Fuhrman has helped tens of thousands of people lose weight permanently and to reverse chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune diseases, and chronic pain syndromes using a nutrient-dense eating pattern that he calls the nutritarian diet. Dr. Fuhrman is the research director of the Nutritional Research Foundation and a member of the Dr. Oz Show Medical Advisory Board. And now, Dr. Fuhrman, we are so excited for this time with you. And now for the interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, Ocean, for that splendid introduction of Joel Fuhrman. And thank you, Joel, for being with us again today.
Oh, my pleasure. Excited to be here and excited to have this opportunity to talk to you again.
Well, you've said often that a nutritarian diet and lifestyle can actually eliminate the risk of having a heart attack, not just reduce the risk, but in many cases eliminate it. That's a very bold assertion. It may seem to some people like it's wishful thinking, but I know it's been proven to be true. Can you explain why you can make such a striking statement?
Sure. Well, there's a lot of reasons why, but let me just preface that with saying that, I'm lucky enough to have been in practice now for more than 25 years, having the opportunity to work with tens of thousands of people with advanced diseases from heart disease, uncontrolled diabetes, diabetic wound infections that aren't healing. And, in heart disease cases that were so advanced, these people were often sent home to die. There was nothing more that could be done for them. Part of your question is I have extensive experience in using aggressive nutritional interventions on the most seriously ill people that you could possibly imagine and aiding these people in their ability to get well. And I decided to pursue this career as a specialist in nutrition, in my mid-20s after I was a competitive figure skater and was working in my father's shoe business with the expectation and hope that I could have this opportunity to work with people like that. And I had this dream, and to see that dream realized has been really a rewarding experience. So one is my personal experience, and the second is the studies that are out there, both the interventional studies and the epidemiologic studies. For example, because the question is about how do we know heart disease can really be reversed in all these cases, why 99%? And I could say, well, look at the Catawba Island off the coast of New Guinea, where 73,000 people are investigated for themselves and their ancestors and find there are no heart attacks and no strokes in this population of individuals living in a more primitive or where they are farming community, where they make their own food and not have the influence of processed food industry spread to that island yet in those days. So we could see that heart disease did not occur ubiquitously all over the world in populations that ate healthfully. In fact, they did not occur. Heart disease almost didn't occur. You could look at even in the United States. There wasn't much heart disease before the 20th century. The point is that heart disease has gone up by 1,000-fold in recent years in human history. And then we have modern studies that show that heart disease is reversible with these type of interventions. And many people might be familiar with some of Dr. Ornish's studies, and I've published my own studies. A recent study published in the American Journal of Lifestyle Medicine on over 443 people with uncontrollable high blood pressure and of course, controllable blood pressure with medications, showing that these people on the average dropped their systolic blood pressure 26 points. Their cholesterol on the average, dropped 100 milligrams without medications. I have studies published on diabetic reversal and heart disease reversal showing that these people in these advanced cases were back to not requiring the medications and having their chest pains go away and having their flow of their heart being restored. So the question is, there's a lot of evidence today, not just with my work, but with other physicians and other research scientists. And the research continues along this field to say at this point, people don't have to have heart disease. It would be rare that a person would ever need to have a heart attack who's embracing healthy eating. But I could say that my look at this, how should I say, the total package of evidence, I can conclude that aggressive nutritional interventions is about 100 times more effective at preventing and reversing heart disease than would be aggressive medical care and medical care use.
Well, a lot of people are hearing today about the Mediterranean diet. It's high in vegetables and fruits. It's been linked to lower cardiovascular risk in a lot of studies. And for many people, a Mediterranean diet seems to be a step in the right direction, but it's not the same as the nutritarian diet that you advocate. While a Mediterranean diet can often reduce the risk of heart disease, a nutritarian diet is designed to and effectively does go much further and essentially eliminates cardiovascular risk. Can you describe the similarities and the differences between the Mediterranean diet and your approach?
Sure. Because, like you're saying, the Mediterranean diet is popular, and it reduces heart attack risk compared to the standard American diet by about 40%, which is a significant reduction in lifespan enhancement and health for people to reduce risk by 40%. But, of course, that's not my goal. My goal is not to do what's popular or even acceptable to the masses. My goal is to devise a program that's ideal so people can lower their risk close to 100%, not 40 or 50%. That way a person knows when they have a serious medical condition, they're doing everything, they've left no stone unturned and doing everything possible to assure their safety, that they don't have these medical crises arise. And, of course, a Mediterranean diet, I consider the studies surrounding a Mediterranean diet to be poor science because there's too many variables involved. Is it the walnuts that are good, the tomato sauce, or is it the white flour on the pizza or the melted cheese on top that was the good part of it? In other words, it's like evaluating a multivitamin in a medical study and say, well, some studies show a multivitamin are good for people and some studies show they're bad, but they're not good studies because there's too many different variables. Was the folic acid breast cancer causing or not? Was the vitamin D lifespan enhancing, or was it which part of the multivitamin use was doing the good part and which part's doing the bad part? It's the same thing here with the Mediterranean diet. There are some parts of the Mediterranean diet that we know are powerfully extend lifespan, like the consumption of green vegetables, like the consumption of tomato products and tomato sauce, like eating beans and greens. And, we know those things definitely have benefits. And people in some of these Mediterranean countries, and especially the old-style Mediterranean diet, where people were eating more vegetables and less processed foods, less white bread, less flour, less cheeses, less meats, and more fish instead of meat. But in any case, it's not an ideal diet, and it might be, just because something's a step in the right direction, it doesn't inform people enough about nutrition. I think we have to teach nutritional excellence in the school systems so people understand the drawbacks, like how bad white flour is, for example, and white bread and white pasta served in the Mediterranean diet, how those refined carbohydrates are high glycemic, and how high glycemic foods like that can destroy you physically, the interior lining of your blood vessels, and impair brain function and reduce intelligence and lead to dementia. There's parts of the Mediterranean diet that are exceedingly dangerous. And the modern Mediterranean diet, with its combination of fish and animal products and cheeses mixed together, drives animal protein and exposure to those animal-based foods to too high a level in the diet, close to 20% of calories, which is already in a danger zone. Of course, Americans are in the 30% range, but even that 20% range is high. We know almost all the studies around the world that we give credence to, that go on for more than 15 years with large numbers of people, show that we see tremendous reduction in cardiovascular death when people reduce animal product consumption from 30% to 15% to below 10%. In other words, we can argue whether 5% or 7.5% or 10% is best or acceptable even, but we can argue if 20 to 30% animal product consumption is favorable, because we have too much data to show that that's a dangerous level of animal product consumption in a diet, because it takes away, of course, the amount of phytochemical-rich vegetation you're eating, but also hormonally, it raises IGF-1 too high, and the combination between the high level of insulin with all the sweets and white flour on the Mediterranean diet, combined with the excessive use of animal products, pushes the hormonal sandwich of insulin and IGF-1 together too high, predisposing these people to accelerated aging and increased risk of cancer.
When you were talking about that some Mediterranean diets have too many animal products, and that can be dangerous, and they could be 20% of their diet, which is an improvement over the 30% that is the standard American diet, but that's a very, very low bar to compare it to. I thought about, there are a lot of people now saying that butter is back. I mean, Time magazine recently ran an article, and the headline said, "The case for eating butter just got stronger." There's a lot of people voicing that type of thought today. What's the truth, though? Do recent medical studies indicate with credibility that we should all go back to eating loads of butter?
I just want to say, to initiate this conversation, that when we take oils and butter and we cook things in them, and that means you heat up the butter, you heat up the oil, you oxidize the fat. And oxidation means this fat, whether it's animal fat, tallow or butter or beef or ghee or olive oil, whatever it is, you produce numerous volatile toxic compounds. And oxidation is not one single reaction, but it's this complex series of many reactions producing multiple toxic compounds. And these oxidized compounds destroys the brain. The brain's particularly sensitive to oxidized oil because it has limited antioxidant activity in the brain. And these oil-generated compounds are so dangerous that even working near a deep-fat fryer in a fast food restaurant and even inhaling the fumes can cause harm to people. So we're talking about these compounds linked to birth defects, linked to autoimmune disease like Crohn's disease, people suffering with lupus from thinking that eating foods fried in oil and butter are okay to eat, and autoimmune diseases and cancer. But the studies on butter that you're talking about only show that when people took butter out of the diet and substituted other types of oils or sugars, that things didn't get better. It didn't show that adding butter to a diet was good or healthful. It didn't show that butter had any beneficial effect. It just showed that when you substitute one bad food for another bad food, you didn't see much differences. And that doesn't exonerate butter. That's like saying if I'm eating candy corn or cotton candy, and instead of eating cotton candy, if I chose to eat a donut, it means that now I'm not seeing any worse evidence of problems from donuts. That exonerates donuts because they're not as bad as cotton candy. It's the most ridiculous conclusion that our population is being bombarded with. We know saturated fat doesn't just increase heart attack risk. Of course, it raises cholesterol, but it promotes more weight gain. It has effects to make you more insulin resistant, promoting diabetes, and it's linked to various cancers. Of course, it'll reduce dangerous foods like butter, and we substitute healthy foods. We're protecting people's lives. But substituting sugar or white flour pasta or white bread with, it's still high glycemic, low nutrient, low fiber carbohydrate, and switching a fat that's low in fiber and low in nutrients to a carbohydrate that's low in nutrients and low in fiber, you're not going to see a difference there in longevity or good health. So people could say, look, they were following a low-fat diet. And they didn't get any better results. As a matter of fact, the low-fat diet got worse results because they were eating so much refined carbohydrates instead of eating butter and oil. But that doesn't exonerate butter and oil either. That just shows you how exceedingly dangerous it is to eat highly refined carbohydrates. They're just because they're worse than butter or oil doesn't make butter and oil good.
Yes, and it's a strong point, and I appreciate the passion with which you articulate it. Are there healthier forms of oil, fat, that people should be eating?
Number one, if people want to use some oil in their diet, like coconut oil or olive oil, it should never be fried and used for frying foods or cooked. We should not be heating and cooking in oil. It's just too dangerous. We should be frying and cooking in water and tomato sauce and pineapple juice and all types of opportune things we can wok things and cook things in rather than cooking in oil, because heating up oils causes too many dangerous toxic compounds to the body. That's number one. Number two, the Prevamid study, for example, showed that when people ate less butter and used more olive oil, heart attack rates did go down. They reduced about 30%, switching from butter and bread and butter to more olive oil in the diet, which shows that's another study that showed that there's some danger to saturated fat. but for olive oil is 14% saturated. However, but in the Prevamed study, when people switched from olive oil to nuts and seeds, then heart disease rates dropped another 35% over the 30% that was initially dropped from the oil compared to the butter. The point is that the nuts and seeds have qualities and nutrients not contained in oils, because the oils are absorbed so rapidly that they turn into fat. The body can't burn them for energy. They have to store it as fat, whereas nuts and seeds are absorbed over many hours. And the sterols and stanols in nuts and seeds are like fat magnets. They increase the stool fat because the fibers that are not absorbed hold on to the oil and pull some calories out of the body. Also, the nuts and seeds facilitate the absorption of the phytochemical or beneficial compounds that are found in the fruits and vegetables, the greens, the tomatoes you're eating. So they have such profound and widespread beneficial effects compared to oil. It just makes sense to minimize your intake of oil so more of your fat calories can come from whole nuts and seeds rather than the oil extracted from those foods. Because, as you know, oil is a processed food. It doesn't grow on trees. You know, walnuts don't have the same effect as walnut oil. Almond oil is not like an almond. There are different biological effects, just like there's a different biological effect when you eat a whole beet compared to eating beet sugar. You know, so we're talking here about making sure people do the best thing.
Well, when you were talking about the multitude of benefits that seeds and nuts have, I was thinking about flax seeds and chia seeds in particular. We spend a lot of money. We spend a lot of attention on treating breast cancer, and it's because there's so many cases of it. But I think it might make a lot more sense to concentrate on preventing the disease from occurring in the first place, particularly because there are nutritional strategies that we know to be safe, to be easily implemented, and that have been proven effective in reducing the risk of breast cancer. And I'm thinking about flax and chia seeds.
That's terrific. Exactly.
So what is it about flax seeds and chia seeds in particular that make them so effective in preventing and in combating breast cancer?
Flax seeds and chia seeds are like a super wonder food that have shown in medical studies to have dramatic protection against breast cancer. Let's just go over like one or two of those studies. But for example, there was a study already that followed women for 10 years who already had a diagnosis of breast cancer. And over that 10-year period, women who took in a third of a milligram of lignin per day had a 71% reduced risk of dying over that 10-year period compared to women not eating lignins. And lignins are a phytochemical, kind of like a phytochemical fiber found in seeds, and they're found in chia seeds and flax seeds and sesame seeds, highest in flax, second highest in chia. But here's the thing. These women already had cancer. That's an advanced pathology, and we know that the body's ability to prevent disease is much more enhanced the earlier in life you start the intervention. Waiting till you already have a diagnosis of breast cancer is pretty late to start eating some lignins. If women started eating it before they got a diagnosis of cancer, we'd expect to see a much greater than 71% reduction. But that's just from the flax seeds or chia seeds alone. You know, we're talking here about how important it is to eat these foods every day because they're so protective. And a lot of your audience, I guess, probably knows that flax seeds lower high blood pressure as effectively or more effective than some medications do. And they also reduce cholesterol, too. So you have here a food that reduces cholesterol, reduces blood pressure effectively, and lowers the risk of prostate cancer in men and breast cancer in women significantly through their beneficial hormonal effects. And we still have a lot of our population not eating these foods. I sound like I'm like a what's the word? I sound like I work for the flaxseed board. You know what I mean? It's almost like I'm enthusiastic about these foods, but I'm enthusiastic about all those G bombs. You know, GBOMBS, and that's greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, seeds. I want people to utilize the whole portfolio of foods with proven anti-cancer effects. I want people, to utilize, turmeric in their spices, or, I want them to actually consume all these beneficial substances, the mixed mushroom extracts. I want them to recognize that nutritional science has made such wonderful advances in the last 10 years, where we're able to give people much more power to control their health destiny, and even people with early-stage cancers to reverse them.
Well, I hear you saying that chia seeds and flax seeds are fabulous for many reasons, and but all the more so when they're combined with the whole what you're calling portfolio
Right,
of green vegetables and beans and mushrooms and onions and berries and nuts and seeds and all these wonderful foods.
right.
I'm thinking about cruciferous vegetables in particular, the cabbage family. There was a Chinese study I saw where women who regularly ate one serving per day of cruciferous veggies had a 50% reduced risk of breast cancer. And another study, a European study, found that women who consumed cruciferous veggies even just once a week had a markedly decreased risk of breast cancer. And I want to talk about these vegetables for a minute. These are the cruciferous vegetables. Before I do, I should probably be sure that our listeners know exactly what vegetables are in this family. The cruciferous vegetable family, sometimes called the cabbage family, includes arugula, cauliflower, all the cabbages, red and green and Savoy and Chinese cabbages, bok choy, collards, rutabagas and turnip greens, broccoli, horseradish, kale, kohlrabi, watercress, Brussels sprouts, mustard greens, radishes, and probably a few more that I missed. But that's the family, and there's something about this cruciferous family or cabbage family that's unique among vegetables because they contain a remarkable glucosinolate content, and as a result have been shown to be so effective against breast cancer, both preventing and treating it. Can you explain the connection?
Sure. Now, first of all, I just want to say one of my mantras for the last 20, 30 years that I say to people is make the salad the main dish. I tell people say to me, what if I don't want to do all the things you're telling me? What if I just want to do one thing or two things? Where do I start? I always say, well, two places to start. One is I want you to have a big salad of raw vegetables every day. And included on that salad has to be some shredded cabbage or kale or watercress or arugula or radishes, whatever, and red onion or something on that, or scallion too. But in any case, I want people to get one serving per day of some type of raw cruciferous that you just mentioned in their diet, because the compounds in the vegetables you're talking about don't have the powerful anti-cancer effects until an enzyme called myrosinase converts them into isothiocyanates or ITCs. It's the ITCs that have this powerful effect. One of the things that people have to recognize here that's so important is that to get the exposure to ITCs, these isothiocyanates, you have to chew the vegetables very well in your mouth, because as you're crushing the cell wall, you're releasing the myrosinase enzyme that combines with the glucosinolates in the cell to form the ITCs. And the better you chew, and the more you eat the vegetable raw, the more you form these beneficial ITCs. Now, when you're having your cooked broccoli or cooked Brussels sprouts, because you had some raw watercress or arugula or kale raw in the salad, you supplied some myrosinase into the digestive tract from the raw cruciferous you ate. And now you're going to get more anti-cancer benefits from the cooked Brussels sprouts or broccoli you ate because you had some raw cruciferous with that same meal.
We're seeing a lot of popularity today for nutritional supplements that contain cruciferous vegetable concentrates. These attract consumer attention. They appear to be healthy, but do they provide the enzyme myrosinase, and are they of the benefit that they purport to be?
I don't think I can, I can't really answer that question fully because there's not enough studies, but the studies we have available already seem to indicate that you're playing a little bit of a risk here, because when you're taking these phytochemicals from real food, you're getting the concentrations in the bloodstream and the rate of absorption in the way nature intended it. And our body's been designed, and our immune system's been designed to benefit from this exact delivery system. And I see so often when people start taking, these extracts and concentrations of isothiocyanates that are now available, like DIM, or they wind up taking concentrations that are achievable in the bloodstream that are usually too high and come in too quickly. And these antioxidants could have pro-oxidation effects when taken in concentrated forms and absorbed so rapidly. we're talking here about there's a subtle biological differences in the way food delivers some things compared to extracting it from the food it came in and then absorbing it in a way that might be too concentrated or come into the bloodstream too rapidly. So the answer is it might be discernible and discoverable in the future that certain isolated isothiocyanate and beneficial some of these beneficial compounds could benefit us to take in supplemental form, but too much of this science has not been thoroughly investigated yet, and there's too much evidence to suggest that we could be putting ourselves at some risk if we're making errors here. If I'm going to make an error, I want to err on the side of caution and make sure I do things that are most likely to be safe and not cause any harm. And so I'm concerned with people taking, testosterone and estrogen. I'm concerned with people taking some of these, these extracts of phytochemicals. However, I do think taking curcumin and turmeric, and it's like a spice, a little spice or a little bit of turmeric. I do think that taking a little bit of mixed mushrooms extracts or dehydrated mushrooms is a beneficial thing to do. I think probably taking a little bit of a low dose of some of these things, like EGCG, like green tea extract that are studied, all these things are likely to be safe and to have beneficial anti-cancer effects. So I think that we have to do a comprehensive investigation on each particular element in question here and try to make a decision that's always based on being conservative and making sure what we're doing is safe.
Well, we've been talking about the multitude of reasons to eat cruciferous vegetables and how best to eat them. There is also a fear that's out there that cruciferous vegetables can harm the thyroid gland. Now, my understanding is that this is only a concern for people who have an iodine deficiency. Do you agree with that, or do you see it differently?
No, I agree with what you just said. It's just this idea that cruciferous vegetables harm the thyroid gland is kind of a ridiculous concept to begin with, because the amount of cruciferous vegetables you'd have to eat in the raw form to suppress thyroid function is an astronomical amount that people who aren't psychologically disturbed, I mean, you know what I'm saying? Your diet couldn't be well-rounded. I remember there was one study on a woman who ate nothing but bok choy all day long, like 16 pounds of bok choy a day, and she harmed her thyroid gland. But, that's not a normal diet. In any case, so
right.
in normal amounts where you have a variety of foods in your diet, you could not harm your thyroid gland at all in any way. In fact, cruciferous vegetable consumption are linked to lower rates of thyroid dysfunction, lower rates of autoimmune thyroiditis, and lower rates of thyroid cancer and thyroid nodules. They actually protect the thyroid, by the way. It would only be a concern if you were iodine deficient, but even then, you'd have to eat almost an unusually large amount, and we're not advocating people be iodine deficient anyway. So it's not a concern for people who understand that a nutritarian program, which is like the word nutritarian just means super healthy, a super healthy, nutrient-rich, or I should say nutrient-dense, plant-rich program considers the foods, and also it considers what are we missing. If we're not getting seaweed in our diet or seafood, then might our diet be too low in iodine or B12 or DHA? What are we missing? So we're saying, well, let's get our diet to be totally comprehensive in a good amount of nutrients, a wide exposure to a wide variety of nutrients humans can use. And then if we do that, is there anything left that we could be deficient in that might harm us long term? Like vitamin D, if you're not getting sunshine, like DHA for 67% of vegans find to have dangerously low DHA levels if not supplemented, so some produce enough. Like B12, and some people require more B12, especially as they age, because they don't absorb it as well as other people. And like iodine, like you're bringing up right now, because if we don't have any foods that are exposing us to iodine, we want to make sure that we have exposure to a moderate amount of iodine. The RDI is 150 micrograms a day, so we don't want to take too much iodine, but nor do we want people to be deficient in any way either.
When we talk about supplements, the big one in the U.S. is calcium. More than half of all American women take calcium supplements. And despite that, we have a number of studies that show that high-dose calcium supplements can actually damage the cardiovascular system. In fact, the greatest risk of coronary artery calcification has been found in women who take calcium supplements while having a low intake of calcium from their food. So my question to you, Joel, is this. How should a woman be eating in the first place in order to get plenty of calcium from her food? And how can she know whether she should or should not be taking calcium supplements?
Well, that's a really good question. So here's the thing, is that number one, as you're very well aware, is that green vegetables and beans and nuts and seeds and even fruit, even orange has 60 milligrams of calcium. In other words, that a diet that you and I both favor, that's high in a wide assortment of colorful plant foods, has adequate calcium. And, animal products have adequate calcium, too, if you ate the bones, like a wild animal does. If we caught the rat or the snake or the frog and chewed the bones, we would get some, or the reptile, little lizards, we would probably get enough calcium from them eating that food. But the point is that we don't do that. We just cut the meat off the bones and leave the bones behind. So the American diet, which is based on processed grains and oil and animal products, has no calcium in it. So it seems reasonable to say, well, you have to steal the milk of another animal to get enough calcium, because we're not eating vegetables, we're eating beans, we're not chewing up the bones or the gristle of small reptiles or small amphibians, and we're not eating, so in other words, a nutritarian diet high in greens and nuts and seeds and different colorful foods is already a high calcium diet. So that's number one. And number two, you're not taking in a lot of the things that force you to lose a lot of calcium in the urine, like excessive animal protein, salt, and sugar, and and phosphoric acid from soft drinks, whatever it is. In other words, your body's going to retain it much better. And you want to have adequate vitamin D exposure so the calcium is absorbed well and retained in the bones. All those things are very important. And the idea that people take these high-dose calcium supplements of 1,000 to 1,500 milligrams a day is unnatural, because when we get our calcium in food, we get a little bit at a time. So let's say we get 250 to 300 per meal, and it's absorbed very slowly into the bloodstream. When you take I don't think taking calcium supplements, even if you took a low dose with each meal, would cause calcification. Just taking this high dose calcium at one time, where you flood the body with calcium at one time, in a bolus, and the body doesn't know what to do with it. So it suppresses vitamin D activity, it stores it in tissues, and causes calcification of tissues or the heart. The point is that we have to get away from the idea of relying on supplements for the major source of our calcium. There are some women, as they age, absorb calcium more poorly than others, and some women require more vitamin D and may do better with a small amount of calcium, maybe a food-based calcium added to meals in a low dose to emulate they have a low appetite for vegetables or something, or they may require a small amount. But again, we have to do that in a conservative fashion based on what people's needs may be, recognizing what you're saying, that taking high doses of calcium, it's not the way nature intended us to do it, especially these synthetic calcium, not food-based, and they're just concentrated calcium minerals, and they're overly concentrated, and they get absorbed too rapidly, and they're not going to protect us as much as a holistic look, and I'm saying a holistic look of all what this person needs, the right type of exercise, making sure their vitamin D is good, the overall content of their whole diet, and the fact that they're getting some calcium exposure in each of the meals they consume, not just in a supplement in one of the meals.
That's a great answer. I want to ask you about another supplement that people sometimes take, and that's zinc. You and I both recommend, and for many reasons, a plant-strong diet that's rich in a variety of plant foods. But one of the problems with a diet low in animal products is it can run a risk of being low in zinc. And the phytic acid that's in beans and seeds and nuts can, in some cases, bind to zinc and reduce its absorption. And then there's the fact that zinc absorption can lessen as people grow older. So do you ever recommend nutritional supplementation with zinc? And if so, in what instances and how much?
According to most of the scientific literature out there, the phytates you mentioned, the phytic acid in beans and vegetables and nuts, binds zinc. So even though a healthy plant-rich diet gives you adequate zinc when you analyze the foods, these zinc-binding compounds double the requirement for zinc in a person on a diet that's very high in plants that's not eating animal products. We know that animal products contain zinc. Meat is high in zinc, and fish is high in zinc. But when people eat less vegetables, of course, and beans and nuts, they're also going to not be taking in zinc binders. So there is legitimate science to suggest that zinc absorption also decreases with aging, and that there's also scientific studies that show that zinc supplementation with aging reduces the risk of pneumonia, increasing immune function in later life. And let me say this to be clear here, is that if we're saying here that a nutritarian diet is going to, we're talking about these G-bombs to wipe out cancer, and the fact that it's so effective to prevent heart disease and stroke, then what is that? What are we going to die of? And people die of falls, and they, die of accidents. They die of weakness, overall body weakness of old age. But also a leading cause of death in healthy eating populations is pneumonia. And so the point is that taking a zinc supplement could decrease your risk of getting pneumonia and increase immune system ability, especially as immune system ability degenerates as people get older and older. So I agree that the RDI for zinc is about 11 micrograms for men, and I think it's about 8 or 9 for women. And I think that supplementing with 5 to 10, with 7, 8, or 9, a small dose of zinc is reasonable with a person on a vegan or near vegan diet who's not getting exposed to seafood or to get that extra zinc. So I think that's reasonable. And, even though I'm trying to look at the science and use supplements more conservatively, I have to always state the fact that certain supplements are harmful to take, like folic acid and like beta-carotene, like isolated vitamin E fragments, like vitamin A, like acetyl palmitate and retinol palmitate, that we say like add to soy milk, or folic acid might be added to nutritional yeast, and people taking huge doses using nutritional yeast in their cooking, and they add folic acid to other things, and they take a vitamin with folic acid in it. So even though while I'm saying that there are certain supplements that you're mentioning that I would agree should be supplemented, I just wanted to put that in context that conventional multivitamins and some of these ingredients in conventionally designed supplements are dangerous. There's so much natural folate in the plant world, and folic acid is a petroleum product, a synthetic that doesn't behave like native folate, and it causes excessive promotion of cellular replication and promoting cancers like prostate and breast cancer. So even though I'm advocating the use of some supplements judiciously, I'm very concerned about people using supplements across the board more cavalier. I want to be very cautious and knowledgeable about what they're taking.
So I hear you saying that some supplements do have value and benefit, but a lot of them, particularly those found in many multivitamins, like folic acid and synthetic vitamin A and vitamin E, cause harm. And I've seen studies that these vitamins can actually increase the rate of cancer and the rate of death. So it seems to me that there are a lot of people, and I would include in this those eating the most nutrient-dense whole foods, plant-strong diets, who would benefit from taking vitamin B12 and vitamin D. Do you agree with that, or do you have a different perspective on those?
No, I agree with you 100%, because people don't realize, and I'm sure you recognize, that the B12 needs for a vegan are higher than the B12 needs for a meat eater. In other words, these meat eaters are eating animal products almost every meal. So they're taking a little B12 at each meal. When you're on a vegan diet, people are taking a pill once a day, and the ability of the body to absorb B12 at one moment in the day is limited. So that if you're going to take B12 in a supplement, then the RDI of 4 micrograms a day is not sufficient. You need to take 100 or 200 micrograms a day. So by diffusion, we can get higher amounts in the bloodstream because we're only taking it at one time. In other words, intrinsic factor can only absorb about 2 micrograms of B12, and that's not sufficient, and that's one time. So we get the rest by diffusion, and we take a higher dose. The 2% of the total dose we can get by diffusion assures us we're getting enough B12. So I'm agreeing with you so much so, not only suggesting that vegans should take B12, but I'm suggesting that vegans should take a much higher dose of B12 than is conventionally recommended to the population at large.
Well, some people obviously require more B12 than others.
Right.
Some people require more vitamin D than others. Some people need more omega-3 than others.
Exactly.
I have a concern, and I don't know if you share this. I want to ask. It's that vegans who, for whatever reason, might require more DHA and EPA, more omega-3s, fatty acids, might develop deficiencies that could lead to dementia as they get older. Do you think that's a legitimate concern? And how do you go about treating a patient who's vegan but who's no longer thriving?
Whoa, those are some heavy questions there. So number one of, and look, I want to be very embracive and enthusiastically supportive of people advocating their various diets. They help a lot of people. But I have to be openly vocal to prevent people from getting into trouble. And we're talking about now that too many vegans have gotten into trouble with later life neurological defects, and I've taken care of this community for 25 years, thousands of people, and tested their blood and found in people with zero omega-3 index, nothing there, or below 1 or 2 levels that are so low. And the problem here is that once you get to the point where you develop the neurologic deficits like Parkinson's or shrinkage of the brain or dementia, then fixing it isn't going to repair things because the brain can't rebuild itself back again. The point I'm making here is that I'm very vocal and advocating that people check their blood or take a supplement, a low-dose supplement of DHA or EPA. Don't just assume your vegan diet is okay or adequate because some guru told you that. It's just too reckless. It's reckless, to assume that all people are. And obviously, you may be aware, we did a study, or I should say I'm aware of this study because I helped fund it through the Nutritional Research Foundation, helped fund this study where we did 167 vegans not supplementing with DHA, showing that 67% were deficient that had an omega-3 index below 4, and that a large percent, about 25%, had an index below 3, which is the levels where we see dementia. We see patients below 3.5 developing dementia in later life when you have levels that low. So the point is, what you're saying is that some people require more than others. Some people genetically can make enough on their own, and it wasn't because they can consume more walnuts or green vegetables or less omega-6 fats. It's not, the correlation was not there. It was really individual genetic differences in conversion enzymes that made one person produce more, another person produce less, not the diet they were eating, so to speak. But in any case, I'm saying it's something we have to be very careful with, and we have to make sure that we don't get anybody in trouble that didn't need to be in trouble. And too often we're seeing that in this community, that people don't pay enough attention to these things we're talking about right now.
Okay, I want to switch gears just a little bit here and bring up one more topic.
Okay.
It's clear that keeping insulin at favorable levels is of great importance. High blood levels of insulin are linked with increased rates of cancer and heart disease and obesity. When we eat high glycemic carbohydrates, glucose rushes into the bloodstream, which causes insulin production to spike. And this is one of the reasons that low-carb diets have become very popular recently. What is it, Joel, that the low-carb diets get right, and what is it that they get wrong?
Ooh. There's really excellent questions, and we know that increased insulin is a problem, and some people, advocating vegan or even near vegan diets have had to have recommended diet styles that were too high glycemic. Eating too much white rice, white bread, white potato, and thinking it doesn't matter what you eat. But we know, we can rate these plant carbohydrates on a hierarchical scale that includes the fiber content, the resistant starch content, the nutrient density, the content of, a whole bunch of criteria, because we can't say white bread is the same thing as eating a bean. Or we can't say, so if white bread's not as good as eating a bean, then what's all the things in between? Corn, peas, pasta, but let's rate all these carbohydrates based on what they have in them. And so in other words, we can't paint all plant foods with the same brush. Some are much richer in nutrients, much higher, have lower glycemic effects. Beans have extremely low glycemic effects, and they're very favorable carbohydrate foods, as are berries, for example. The other element here is that when we start eating a diet that's richer in animal products, animal fats, coconut oil, things like that, these saturated fats block the uptake of insulin. They block the key mechanism that allows insulin to be brought into the cells, and that's called increasing insulin resistance and accelerating the harm that the carbohydrates you do eat will have on the body. And that's been shown in massive studies. For example, a recent study published in the 2014 issue of Cell Metabolism followed 6,000 people for 18 years. And the people between 50 and 65 followed for 18 years, followed that overall death was down 75% in the people eating lower amounts of animal products. And cancer death was fourfold higher in those eating more animal products. But here's the thing. Diabetes was 73% higher in those eating higher amounts of animal products. Through all ages, eating in the 65 to 80-year-olds, the people eating more animal products had worsening of their diabetes, and we've shown that in large-scale studies now. And I say that because we have to give more credence to studies that follow thousands of people for many, many years, like the British Medical Journal study that followed people for more than 15 years, showing 60% increased death rate for people eating higher amounts of animal products versus lower amounts. What I'm saying here is that the people advocating paleo or this, they can always show some study that follows people for a year or two, showing they lost weight or their cholesterol looked better, their glucose looked better. But those aren't the studies we have to give credence to. We have to give more credence to studies that go long-term with larger amounts of people, so we can really see the data if these benefits hold water. And the point is that these low-carbohydrate diets are dangerous when adhered to, when followed long-term for many years, and that's where the money's at.
And that's what's most important. Joel, do you have any final comments to our listeners today to help them improve their lives, improve their health, and extend their longevity?
You know, my comment is this, because this is what the kickback I get from friends and sometimes family and things, so they know what I'm saying is true or right, is they don't think that they're going to enjoy eating as much sometimes, or that it's going to take up too much of their time. And I just want to make the final comment that I've been doing this as you have, John and Ocean, for so many years that I have to say that I eat the most delicious, pleasurable diet in the world. I eat the most delicious, great-tasting food. I enjoy eating it so much. There's a little bit of a learning curve, yeah. Your taste buds adjust, that's true. But there's an increase in pleasure in eating, not a decrease in pleasure, because I think the people listening to all this good science are going to say, yeah, but, I'd rather live a shorter life and just enjoy my food more. But they're not enjoying their food more. They're living a shorter life and having tragedies and ruin the quality of their later years. And I'm just saying I just had an incredible lunch right before this. I'm eating this lunch. I'm going, wow, this is so delicious. And then you intellectually, it's good for you too. And there's no reason why we can't marry together good taste and great health. And that's the thing I wanted to end with.
Well, that's a beautiful thought, bringing together great taste and good health.
Right.
And Joel, I want to thank you for your clarity and the depth of your research and your commitment to and passion to help people live the healthiest possible lives. It rings through everything you say. It's always a pleasure and it's always an education to speak with you. On behalf of Ocean and myself and of everyone involved in the food revolution, I want to thank you for your outstanding work, and I want to thank you for being here with us today.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure.
We've been talking with Dr. Joel Fuhrman, author of many bestsellers, including Eat to Live and The End of Heart Disease, and research director of the Nutritional Research Foundation. Joel, your brilliant work and your penetrating insights are a source of hope and health for millions. We want to thank you so much for your legendary research, for your brilliant leadership, and for the tremendous difference you are making in so many lives. And of course, thank you for your partnership in the food revolution.
You're welcome, and thank you.
Thank you so much to Dr. Joel Fuhrman and to my dad and colleague John Robbins for that incredibly informative, powerful conversation. If you want to express your opinions on what you've been hearing, and if you want to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments section at the bottom of our broadcasts page. Make sure to refresh the comments using the refresh button so you can see the most recent comments. Our next presentation will be an interview with Dr. William Lee. It's going to be very informative and empowering as well. It will start at the top of the hour in approximately 11 minutes. So now I'm going to respond to some of the comments that have come in so far. We heard from Barbara Perry McLaurin, who said, "So excited to hear Dr. Fuhrman. Learned about this summit from his website. Have been following his plan for diabetes for the past month. I've lost 10 pounds, and my fasting blood sugar has decreased by 20 points. delicious plant foods, and I have lots of energy. That's so wonderful to hear, Barbara. You've already, in just a month, lost 10 pounds and having your blood sugar coming into balance. We're so happy for you. And we hear these stories so often. And I just want to say how grateful I am to Dr. Fuhrman, to Dr. Lee, to Dr. Turner, to all of the presenters in this summit. We're so privileged, aren't we? That their work is out there, that they're doing this and that they're changing lives. And we're so privileged in this summit to be able to bring their voices all into one place, all interviewed so brilliantly by my dad, John Robbins. I just love the questions he asks and the ways that he puts all of these conversations into such useful context. And thank you, Barbara, for sharing your story. We heard from D. Broku, who said, I am so grateful for this seminar. I turned my life around about 1.5 years ago. I have 6 growing children and 9 grandkids and 2 great-grandkids. It is shocking how my family chooses not to listen and embrace whole food, plant-based diets, in spite of witnessing the changes in my health, physical and mental. I am 74, and my 50-year-old sons have more aches and pains than I do. Well, Dee, thank you for living this. Thank you for sharing your story. I'm sorry that your family is, that you're having to watch them suffer, and that it's hard for them to embrace what you're embracing. Of course, we teach best by example, and sometimes it is the pain and suffering that pushes people into action. So I hate to say it, but I guess my hope is that some of the suffering that your sons are going through right now can eventually help to propel them forward on their path to make the changes that will help them to have the greatest health. And thank you for living the food revolution in your life. You know, we can't control what other people do, but we can teach by example, and step by step, we do help to shift food culture. We heard from Jim Withers, who commented, as a beekeeper who depends upon selling honey for a living, it discourages me to hear the disparaging comments about honey. I am and have been plant-based for a little over a year and have benefited remarkably from the change. I use honey on a daily basis and enjoy healthy benefits from it as well. One more point. Everyone who lives on a plant-based diet relies very much on the pollination my honeybees provide. Without them, there would be few fruits and vegetables available. I love my honeybees and treat them better than most people treat their pets. Well, thank you, Jim, and I appreciate you speaking up. And even more so, I appreciate your work to care for your bees, and really for all of us. Bees are critical to our ability to pollinate and to grow food, and their survival right now is in serious danger with the spread of colony collapse disorder. Careful and conscientious beekeepers are helping to support the survival of plant-based life and the future of agriculture. This is no small matter. So, Jim, we want to thank you for all you're doing. And it's true that honey, and especially raw honey, has a lot of enzymes and nutrients that may be beneficial for health. It's also true that it's a very concentrated sweetener that can be triggering for some people who struggle with food addiction issues. We're going to hear more about that and how it all works when we look at the neuroscience of weight loss and food addiction with Dr. Susan Pierce-Thompson and also with Dr. Robert Lustig in a few days. So I don't think there's any one-size-fits-all solution or answer for everyone here. I do want to issue a warning about honey, which is that there is a huge difference between local, small-scale organic beekeepers like Jim and the large-scale industrialized honey production that sometimes gasses bees or feeds them high-fructose corn syrup, and that treats them in a manner that is kind of similar to today's factory farms. So if you do choose to eat honey, then I encourage you to choose local, organic, preferably raw honey, so that you can invest in a healthier and a more humane food system. And now I want to share with you a pre-recorded testimonial from Dr. Pat Spenceley. He's a family practice doctor from Newberg, Oregon, who participated in one of our past Food Revolution summits. What he learned helped to inspire him to make changes that have helped him lose 50 pounds and to transform his medical practice to be an inspiration for all of us. Dr. Spenceley is an inspiring example for doctors everywhere. Here is his story in his own words.
Hi, my name is Pat Spenceley. I'm a family practice doctor. I'm 51 years old, and I practice in a small community office called Villa Medical in Newburgh, Oregon. As I learned through the Food Revolution interviews that John Robbins performed, the things that really impacted you and I in our regular everyday life, I realized that the nutritional training that I got in medical school was just completely inadequate to function as a effective preventative physician. And the information that I learned at the Food Revolution not only changed my own personal lifestyle, but has helped me be much more effective as a communicator, as a physician. Brenda and I have been following a plant-based nutrition program now for a little over a year. I initially made the effort to change because of health reasons. I was suffering from asthma and using a very expensive injection that was given in my arms every 2 weeks, and still suffering from asthma bad enough to need to use prednisone several times over a year's period of time. I enabled myself to eat more plants, and in doing so, realized that the animal-based foods were just not to my liking. My health improved. My energy level is much better. I've lost over 50 pounds, and I feel that I'm going to live a longer, healthier life. As a physician, when people asked me prior to learning the material that John Robbins introduced me to, I was only able to provide patients with advice about medications, perhaps a referral to see a dietitian. Now I'm able to talk to them with enthusiasm about osteoporosis, about preventing cancer, about how to stay away from being diabetic, hypertensive, obese, to deal with their cholesterol in an effective way with a far less reliance on the drugs and the procedures. I feel that I am much more healthy. I've lost over 50 pounds. My energy level couldn't be better. I'm now able to swim 20,000 yards every week. I look and feel better, and I think I'm going to live a far healthier life.
Thank you so much to Dr. Spenceley for those inspiring words and for sharing that story and for transforming his medical practice to help teach food and nutrition and health as this source of well-being for his patients. We heard from Christine Michet, who said, "Dear John and Ocean, thank you so much for this summit year after year. It's amazing how much we can keep learning. I am better health-wise and hope to be a light for health to other people who see that it is possible. I also didn't know hardly anything about nutrition when these summits began. I thought I did, since I'd been reading books and articles for about 40 years. You are indeed a light that has blessed me and those whose lives mine touches." Well, thank you so much, Christine, for sharing those words and for touching lives with your own. You know, we really do send out ripples. Every choice we make sends out ripples. We change the way food is grown and processed and produced when we change what we buy. And we also change the way people in our lives think about food when they see how we eat it and enjoy it. And especially when we are able to be beacons of health. We heard from Armando Santos, who said, "Wow, I thought I knew a lot already about diet and supplements with all the books and documentaries about healthy eating I've read and seen. But what Dr. Fuhrman and John Robbins discussed just blew my mind. Such good information. Thank you so much. Greetings from the south of Sweden." Thank you, Armando. And we also heard from Nicole Spencer, who said, "OMG, this is such good information. All of this is going to be worth listening to over and over again." And yes, that is one of the reasons why we love to share the empowerment package, so you can own the MP3s and transcripts for life and listen to it again and again and share it with people you love. And in that spirit, it's time for this segment's empowerment package giveaway, which goes to Lizette Summers, who said, "I have been vegetarian for 7 years now and wish I had started my kids on more plant-based years ago. I'm now trying to get my family to eat less meat. The biggest struggle is the lack of knowledge from outside family cheering my children on when they choose meat instead of the healthy alternative I serve. I'm looking forward to all the speakers, and I'm learning so much already. My hope is to learn as much as I can to educate my kids and other family members that healthy living is a much better life to live, and a plant-based diet is a good thing." Well, Lizette, hopefully the empowerment package will help you even more to be deeply informed and to educate other people. I know you will put it to good use, and you'll have the MP3s and the transcripts for life. Congratulations. And congratulations to all of our new recent Empowerment Package owners who have invested in the Food Revolution mission and in their health. Keith from Seattle, Manuela from Canada, Rebecca from New York, Deborah from California, Daniel from Massachusetts, Paulina from Switzerland, Andrew from Michigan, Susie from North Carolina, and everybody else who's stepping up and stepping forward. And now it is time for us to move to the next segment of today's powerful broadcast, which is an interview with Dr. William Li. Welcome to the Food Revolution Summit, where we explore how you can heal your body and your world with food. This is Ocean Robbins, and I am joined by my dad and colleague, John Robbins, in welcoming our guest, Dr. William Li. Dr. Li is an international expert on health and fighting disease based on diet, lifestyle, and a new approach called angiogenesis, which means keeping the body's blood vessels in balance. As president and founder of the Angiogenesis Foundation, he's leading worldwide efforts to bring revolutionary ways to prevent and treat cancer, diabetes, blindness, heart disease, obesity, and more than 70 other conditions. Dr. Li created the Eat to Beat Cancer program, which has spread to more than 40 countries. His wildly popular TED Talk, Can We Eat to Starve Cancer?, has been seen by more than 5 million people. So now, Will, my dad and I are so excited about your groundbreaking work, and we're so glad to have you with us. And now, for this interview, I'm going to hand it over to my dad, John Robbins.
Well, thank you, Ocean, and thank you, Will, for being with us today.
My pleasure.
You know, when I saw your TED Talk and was so impressed by it, I was thinking about last year's annual meeting of the American Association for Cancer Research. There were 18,000 researchers and doctors and other health professionals there. There was an evening reception hosted by the MD Anderson Cancer Center, at which there was a dinner, and the guests ate there was a sumptuous buffet that included thick slabs of roast beef and a large variety of rich cheeses. There were no vegetables. And afterward came the Cancer Research Association's grand celebration with its sumptuous dessert buffet. It just boggled my mind, really, that this could happen, that these would be the foods they would serve at a time when we know obesity is causing more fatal cancers than cigarettes. So, Will, what I want to ask you is, how did you first come to seriously consider the possibility that cancer treatment and cancer prevention might be connected to food?
Well, I'm a doctor, a medical doctor, internal medicine by training, and I'm very pro-medicine. I trained at Massachusetts General Hospital, Harvard Teaching Hospital at Boston, and I spent the last 30 years as a hardcore molecular and cellular scientist, and I actually helped to develop many new drugs for cancer and other diseases. But, you know, my feeling is that the right medicine for the right person at the right time can mean the difference between life and death. But in my career, I also realized something else, and that is that the way healthcare often works is unsustainable. And when you take a look at the average cost to develop a single new medicine can exceed $1 billion a year and take more than a decade, and that new treatments for diseases like cancer, even after they're approved by the FDA, wind up being on the order of $200,000 or more a year, most of the people around the world will never get the benefit of the treatments that carry such a high cost and are really chasing the horse of the disease after it's come out of the barn. So I realize we can't rely on medicine alone to save us. So my organization at the Angiogenesis Foundation, which I helped to create in 1994, has been conducting research and analyzing scientific evidence because we came to recognize that fruits, vegetables, herbs, beverages made from teas and coffees, and even seed-generated substances like cacao contain natural substances, bioactives, that are sometimes as powerful as the drugs we develop that in terms of preventing and intercepting diseases. And we also recognize that about 80% of deaths from non-communicable diseases like cancer and heart disease and diabetes and others can be prevented by diet and lifestyle. So what I did is put my organization onto a program where we began using the tools of modern science, indeed the same tools used to develop modern biotechnology medicines, and we turned those tools to study foods instead. And the results are startling.
Can you tell us some of those startling results?
Right. So we actually began looking at foods like soy, like tea, like broccoli, and other foods, and we compared the whole foods that we extracted using modern laboratory methods and compared them to cancer drugs. And when we actually tested these food extracts using the same laboratory tools that are used by pharmaceutical companies to develop drugs, we were able to do head-to-head comparisons and often found the same or even higher levels of activity. We found that wasn't enough, and we needed to be able to correlate this with public health information as well, because the proof in the pudding at the end of the day is whether or not foods would actually reduce the risk of cancer. So we have a program at the Angiogenesis Foundation that is built around both the hardcore molecular science of food. We study food just like we would study biotechnology drugs, and then we correlate those results in how they interfere with diseases like cancer with public health information to see how these foods actually perform in large real-world populations.
You talk about angiogenesis. That may be a new term for our audience, for some folks. It's the process by which our bodies grow new blood vessels, essentially. In what ways is angiogenesis involved in cancer?
Right. So angiogenesis is how our body grows blood vessels, and it's actually critical to life itself. What's interesting about angiogenesis is that it is now being recognized, blood vessels growth, as a new defense system in the body. In other words, if you have too few blood vessels in the body, the cells can't survive because they don't have enough oxygen or nutrients. And on the other hand, if you have too many blood vessels, those same vessels can feed diseases and increase the damage that's caused to organs by the disease. So think about angiogenesis like another defense system, like the immune system. Too much is bad. That is autoimmunity. Too little, immune deficiency is bad. You want to have just right. I often use the analogy of the fairy tale of Goldilocks. You don't want too much or too little. You want just the right amount for health. And that's really the central dogma of how angiogenesis or blood vessels help us stay healthy, and how we can actually use diet to help ensure that our blood vessels are just in the right amount for balance.
I hear you saying that if we have too few blood vessels, then our cells and our organs aren't properly nourished, and they may begin to deteriorate or even die. And yet if we have too many blood vessels, this can lead to illnesses, and I'm thinking of things like cancer and macular degeneration. So, Will, how can we know if the angiogenesis in our bodies is in balance or not, and what can we do to help improve that balance?
Yeah, great question. So here's the thing. Researchers are still working on different methods to measure angiogenesis in the body, and it's different in different organs and in different tissues at different times. So the balance occurs at the tissue level, at the organ level, and how we know when angiogenesis is in balance is when we're functioning normally. How we know presently when angiogenesis is out of balance is when we associate and we see the signs of disease.
Well, here at the Food Revolution Network, one of our goals is to improve health and reduce cancer rates by promoting cancer-fighting foods. Based on the latest medical evidence, are there practical, healthy, and tasty food choices that people can make every day at every meal to incorporate cancer-fighting foods into their diets?
Absolutely, John. The scientific evidence has accumulated over the last 30 years shows that we can actually measure what foods can do in the body using rigorous research. And what we're finding is that certain foods, when consumed in the proper amount, at the right frequency, when it's sourced the right way and prepared in the right way, can dramatically impact your health, including the prevention of cancer and even improve cancer survival. And the range of foods that actually can do this are many of the ones that you would think associated with a diet that is rich in fruits and vegetables and seeds and nuts and minimal in meat. And so it falls right in line with the what we now know is the building blocks of a healthy diet, and in fact, very similar to a Mediterranean diet.
I saw a study of 29,000 women, and it showed that eating leafy green vegetables, either 1 cup raw or 1/2 cup cooked per day in this case, lowered ovarian cancer risk by a staggering amount, 66% reduction in ovarian cancer risk. Now, leafy greens, we know, are packed with an arsenal of cancer-fighting phytonutrients, including isothiocyanates. Well, how do these substances help reduce cancer risk so significantly? And can they even help fight cancer once it's established in the body?
Yeah, John, this is a great question and one that I'm very interested in. We've been looking at green leafy vegetables and what they contain, and as you mentioned, the isothiocyanates. And isothiocyanates are protective against cancers of the lung, in the GI tract, in reproductive cancers like ovarian cancer. And what's helpful to understand is how they work. First of all, let's start with where they're found. Isothiocyanates are actually breakdown products from substances, natural chemicals that are found in cruciferous vegetables, so the leafy greens. And when you eat one of those vegetables and you chew them, and so chewing becomes important, the act of chewing the vegetables, you actually crush the plant cells and you release chemicals called glucosinolates that are stored in the plant cells. And as you keep on chewing, there's another enzyme that's in that cruciferous dark green leafy vegetable called myrosinase. And the enzyme digests the glucosinate, and eureka, what you actually wind up with is the isothiocyanate. So in other words, right from the get-go, when you put a piece of broccoli in your mouth or a piece of kale and you chew it, you're starting a chemical chain reaction based on what Mother Nature's already baked into the plant to release and generate a byproduct that can actually help fight cancer. Now, researchers have looked at many different ways that isothiocyanates work to interfere with cancer. One thing that we know these isothiocyanates do is they interfere with the cell pathways that cancer cells need to grow. Isothiocyanates also are anti-inflammatory, and we know that inflammation is really important for cancer formation. And isothiocyanates actually also reduce the formation of carcinogens. So there's a really interesting study in smokers that found that, if you took people who are actively smoking and you fed them only 6 ounces a day of watercress, a dark leafy green that contains isothiocyanates when you chew them, that eating that watercress will reduce the activation of the carcinogens found in tobacco. It's really quite amazing. The other thing about isothiocyanates, it's right in my wheelhouse, is that they actually inhibit angiogenesis. So when you chew these dark leafy greens, release these byproducts that you then swallow, and they get into your bloodstream, they will actually cut off the blood supply feeding cancer cells. So if you actually have cancer, just eating these foods will actually help boost your body's protective effect to prevent cancers from getting their own nutrients. Secondly, if you're at risk for cancer, which everybody is, eating foods containing isothiocyanates can help to create an environment in your body that's suppressive for angiogenesis to feed cancers. In other words, anti-angiogenic, cancer-starving, preventing cancers from hijacking the blood supply to feed themselves is cancer preventative.
You're talking about dark green leafy veggies like watercress and the cruciferous veggies, of which watercress is one. Kale, collards, mustard greens, and broccoli are also. I'm also thinking about the lighter colored vegetables in that same family, cauliflower and cabbage. And I'm thinking in particular of a study of 350,000 people that found that those who ate even a quarter cup a day of cabbage, which is really not a great deal, it's a quarter cup a day, nearly halved their chances of getting cancers of the upper gut. To me, these are staggering statistics that give us evidence that we really could prevent a significant number of the cancers that are taking place. Well, if we were truly to get serious about our diets and our lifestyles, and if we were to eat an optimally cancer-fighting diet, what percentage of cancer cases might we actually prevent?
Yeah, so cancer is one of the leading causes of death in the world, and the National Cancer Institute reported that in 2016. So last year, there were 1.7 million new cases of cancer and about 600,000 cancer-related deaths. That's a lot of disease burden for society, and you got to realize that we're seeing cancers take out people who are young, in their prime of their life, and active contributors to society. So there's an economic or an indirect cost as well. But many cases of cancers are preventable, as you know, from smoking cessation, lifestyle factors, being not being a couch potato, not drinking too much and wearing sunscreen. But what's interesting is the contribution of diet. So all other things being equal, the American Institute of Cancer Research estimates that about a third of cancers are preventable by diet alone, a third. So what that means is that we hold our own destiny 3 times a day in the choices that we're making when we're setting out to eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And that's why I think to get serious about diet and health and cancer reduction also means that we have to get serious about the science, understand why this happens, and develop the evidence that can actually make this more an everyday practicable habit in society.
We're often advised to eat bright colors, berries, and we are directed to think about the pigments in foods like purple potatoes and blueberries and dark orange carrots and squash and the yellow in avocados as clues. Are these foods particularly helpful in fighting cancer?
Yes, John, you're actually right about that. The pigments that we find in foods that make them so colorful when you walk into the grocery store or, if you're traveling into a farmer's market, our eyes are instantly drawn towards colorful foods. Well, those pigments that make foods colorful are actually the bioactives, and they had a reason to develop over evolution. And if you think about bioactives in plants that created food, so plant-based foods, and you go all the way back to early days where these plants were starting to form, in prehistory. You got to realize these bioactives were created for the plant, not for people. In the plant, they tended to do 2 things. One is these bioactives were natural insecticides, so they prevented bugs from eating them. So many types of protective factors, in fact, insects don't like. But the other things is that the pigments that make plants really colorful tended to attract bees that would then pollinate the plant, ensuring its survival. And so colorful pigments that are bioactives originally had the function of helping the plant survive and reproduce over time. Now, when when humans started to eat plant-based foods that contain these pigments, so think of your bright-colored carrots or your purple potato, and we put these foods in our mouth and we ate them, suddenly those same chemicals that served the plant had another job description when they got into the human. they started to interact with our cells. And what's interesting is that the darker, the more pigmented colored bioactives really have profound effects. So, for example, and we know what these are, by the way. So, for example, the purple in a Peruvian purple potato is made from anthocyanin. So we know the molecule. In beets, bright red beets or dark red beets, it's called beta-cyanin. And in avocados, there's lutein. And each of these dyes actually, when we swallow them, actually interact with our cells. Some interesting clinical correlations. Papayas, right? We see them when we're traveling to a beachfront tropical place, or sometimes on a salad bar. One of the most interesting, brightly colored foods, the bright orange comes from a natural chemical called beta-cryptozanthin. And this pigment, beta-cryptozanthin, has been shown to prevent even the earliest forms of cancer. So, for example, in women who are infected by the human papillomavirus, HPV, that causes abnormal pap smears and can be a precursor to cervical cancer, a study of papayas found that women who had been infected by HPV, who ate half a cup of fresh papayas a week, had an 80% reduced risk of developing the earliest stages of cervical cancer. So think of color as a sign of health, right? I mean, when we see something really pale, we think of it as not as healthy. When we think of something colorful, we think of health. And I think that eating colorful fruits and vegetables is something that we're naturally drawn to do, and now there's some science to back it up.
When you're talking about the bioactives and the colors, I was thinking about tomatoes and lycopene.
Yeah.
They are great sources of lycopene. And I saw one study where women who ate the equivalent of a single small tomato every day had a 40% lower breast cancer risk. From the point of view of cancer prevention, does it matter whether the tomatoes are raw or cooked?
Yeah, well, first of all, tomatoes are not just good for women, they're also good for men. There's another big study, around 70,000 men, the Harvard Health Professional studies that showed that men who had about a half cup of tomatoes, cooked tomatoes, that tomato sauce, 2 to 3 times a week, had about a 40% risk of prostate cancer. So if you think about breast cancer and prostate cancer covering the moms and dads and the grandmas and grandpas of the world, and you realize that eating tomatoes can make a difference, well, that's a really worthy thing of putting into the diet. So you asked about cooking versus raw. Here's an interesting fact when you think about why it is that tomatoes are good for you. Now, we know that tomatoes have lycopene, and lycopene is the bioactive that can help interfere with cancer development. And it turns out that the lycopene in a raw tomato that you pick off a vine in the garden is in a chemical structure that your body has a hard time absorbing. In fact, most of it, about 80% of it, passes through your body, out into the toilet. Eating tomato in a salad might be really tasty and might give you some vitamins, but you're not getting those cancer fighters at concentrations that you would want to have. On the other hand, tomatoes are much better for you when you cook them. When you cook tomatoes, their lycopene levels increase. In fact, sautéing a tomato for 15 minutes or more will make the amount of lycopene rise by 50% or more. So how you cook food can make a big difference. Here's another thing about cooking tomatoes. If you cook tomatoes, a really great way to heat tomatoes is using extra virgin olive oil, another healthy oil that comes from Mediterranean product, olive. And it turns out that you can easily heat a tomato in olive oil and convert all those hard-to-absorb lycopene molecules into easy-to-absorb molecules. So I didn't mention that when you cook them, you actually flip the switch so that about 80% of the lycopene is absorbed by the body into the bloodstream. So cooking tomatoes actually can increase the amount of lycopene, the right kind of lycopene your body can absorb. And if you do it with olive oil, you actually help to get that up to temperature in the right way. And if you think about it, then you've got really tomato sauce, and we go right back to the Mediterranean diet.
So I'm hearing that cooked tomatoes we can absorb the lycopene much better.
Yeah.
And Am I hearing also that if we combine cooked tomatoes with olive oil, then the absorption of lycopene increases yet again?
Yeah, that's right, because lycopene is naturally a fat-soluble molecule, meaning that when you just drink it with water, for example, it doesn't mix very well. And since our blood is mostly water, when you actually have lycopene with oil, and the oil helps to absorb it into the bloodstream, it kind of carries it right into your stomach and gets in your bloodstream easier. So you take the cooked lycopene that your body can absorb, you combine it with the olive oil, which helps to dissolve it and make it easier for your body to absorb. Now you've really kind of greased the skids for getting this lycopene into your body. Those Mediterraneans really knew what they were doing when they had slow simmer tomato sauce.
And the Mediterranean diet has shown so many beneficial effects.
Right.
I want to ask you about a couple of other foods.
Sure.
What is the impact of green tea on cancer?
Well, green tea has really become almost universally known as a healthy beverage. And, if you go back to ancient Asia, it's actually one of the most popular beverages in the world. I think tea is, in fact, the second most popular beverage in the world, second to water. And the science and public health studies on green tea are now really starting to stack up. There's a study called the Shanghai Women's Health Study that looked at 69,000 women and found that those who drank green tea at least 3 times a week had about a 37% reduction in the risk of developing colon cancer compared to women who didn't drink green tea. So think about that. Drinking a beverage 3 times a week lowers your risk by a third for colon cancer. And similar findings exist for stomach cancer and even ovarian cancer. Cancers, the teas in the gut. So you might expect some benefits in the gut. But it also has catechins. These are natural molecules. They're the heavyweights in green tea that gets absorbed into your bloodstream. And you can also prevent ovarian cancer and other types of cancers as well, including skin cancers. What's interesting is that catechins, the bioactives from tea, although they can impact on cancer cells directly, it seems like they're much more powerful in cutting off the blood supply, feeding small cancers. In other words, green tea is an excellent anti-angiogenic beverage to prevent cancers from growing.
What about cinnamon? Does it also have anti-cancer effects?
Yeah, cinnamon is a really interesting spice. As we're talking, it's almost like we're walking through a pantry in a kitchen and picking out interesting items and, trying to learn more about them and, share them with folks who similarly go into their kitchens and are wondering, what should I put in my food or what should I cook with? So let's talk about cinnamon. Cinnamon actually comes from the tree bark, and it's about 4,000 years old. So it is a really, really ancient product. It was used, in fact, in the old spice trades. And there's been a number of studies looking at cinnamon because it's been known to have medicinal value going all the way back to the ancient days. What I can tell you now is that we've identified bioactives like cinnamic acid that can interfere with cancer growth. Cinnamic acid in cinnamon is anti-angiogenic, meaning it cuts off the blood supply, killing cancer cells. And it can also be anti-inflammatory. There's antimicrobial. It's anti-diabetic properties as well. And so here's, again, an ancient spice used over the centuries that has been well known to have healthful properties. And now we're just beginning to use real science to tease apart what's going on and what they do. Now, there's been a recent study by the U.S. Department of Agriculture that looked at cinnamon, and they looked at extracts from cinnamon, and they found that, in fact, cinnamon extracts can prevent a molecule that biotech companies develop drugs to go after called vascular endothelial growth factor, or VEGF. This is the growth factor that cancer cells release in order to grow a blood supply. So this study showed that an extract from cinnamon can knock out that bad guy that cancer cells create, that growth factor, again, supporting the fact that cinnamon might really be a reservoir for some useful molecules that we can not only enjoy great taste and have great flavor, but also can be helpful for our health. Now, I want to give you a caveat to that, John, and that's, for every benefit the Paracelsus once said the difference between the cure and the poison is the dose. And for cinnamon, the caution is that cinnamon also contains other bioactives like coumarin. And coumarin sounds a lot like the drug Coumadin, which thins the blood. In fact, that's where they got the concept of Coumadin. And Coumadin, which thins the blood, can also cause kidney damage when you give it in high doses. So that's why, I don't recommend people use cinnamon as a drug and to really, eat huge quantities of cinnamon. But what I would say is that there are so many dishes where you can actually use healthful spices as a way of lighting up your taste buds, really making a meal enjoyable. And now you know that you can also get some healthy molecules just by flavoring your food as well.
Well, do we know what the limit might be on how much cinnamon we should be eating? I mean, I'm hearing that it's good at a certain dosage, but too much would have adverse effects. So how will people know what the right amount to eat might be?
Yeah, so here's my rule of thumb when it comes to spices, because researchers are still really just beginning to tease apart this whole dose effect in the concept, in the realm of spices. I would say don't use spice as a drug. Use it as a flavor-enhancing, health-enhancing additive. So if you're actually flavoring a food, your hot apple cider, or putting onto an apple pie, or whether you're flavoring a cake, that's fantastic. Just know that what you're making the food taste good with is also good for you. So I think, just to recap, spices should be used for how they help make our foods flavorful. Choose them for that reason. Don't use more spice than it would take. In other words, don't use so much spice that it wouldn't taste good. And I think our bodies will titrate how much you would accept. And that's another thing, is that somehow over the course of evolution, we kind of know how much we should be taking in. And you know how animals will eat certain foods and not eat certain foods. I would say follow our own instincts, our own primal instincts about how much we should be eating, rather than following some kind of dictum that somebody says you got to eat X amount of spice, just because we don't know everything about it, and it could be dangerous.
I'm hearing you actually talk about the wisdom of the body, the natural intelligence of the body, and that if we, in this case with cinnamon, eat the amount that tastes good to us,
right,
we're probably getting the right amount for its anti-cancer effects. And that if we put it in a capsule and swallowed it, we would bypass our taste buds. We wouldn't have any idea really how much we were taking or what it was doing to us.
Yeah, I always recommend using the whole food in its freshest natural form compared to a capsule of any sort. And by the way, oftentimes when we combine things like cinnamon, which has cancer-fighting activity, with, let's say you put it in hot apple cider. You wanted to choose a cider that's made with cloudy, the cloudy type of, not clear apple juice because that's filtered, but the cloudy apple cider contains all those proanthocyanins that are found in apples. Those are cancer fighters too. So it's not that we're looking at, cinnamon as the treatment. We're looking at the combination, let's say a beverage that's not only tasty and warming and comfort generating, but also something that's also good for our bodies. So follow the body, the wisdom of the body.
When you talked about foods, whole foods, rather than supplements made from isolated substances within them, I was thinking about red wine. We hear a lot about red wine reducing cancer risk. We hear a lot about it containing resveratrol as kind of the magic substance there. Some people, including many of them in 12-step programs like AA, really shouldn't drink any alcohol at all. What about taking resveratrol supplements? Is that a valuable thing to do?
Yeah, so the first thing about, our research coming out of red wine is that resveratrol is probably important, but it's clearly not the only thing. There are thousands of natural bioactives that occur in wine. Think about it. You take red grapes, you put them into a fermentation vat to make wine, and it takes years. And it's true, alcohol develops, and you get wine solids that develop, and you get must that develops, and the alcohol then further extracts natural bioactives into the red wine. We know resveratrol is good. It actually is anti-angiogenic, and it's cancer. It kills cancer cells as well. It's a polyphenol. However, what we don't know is how much resveratrol you really need. And so when you sort of isolate the resveratrol, put it in a capsule and start swallowing it, you're probably not hurting yourself by having these supplements to, up to a certain point. But you're probably not really getting the full benefit of the natural substance. And so what I would say is concentrate less on the individual bioactive. You should know that they exist, but concentrate on the whole food. So, for example, someone who can't really eat wine, I would recommend eating red grapes. Now you're actually getting the vitamins, you're getting the minerals, you're getting the fiber from a grape, and you're probably getting also many of the natural chemicals that are also present in red wine. And I can name some of them like quercetin, myrcetin, anthocyanin. The list goes on and on. So I would say, people who have to be careful about alcohol can easily find alternatives to alcohol itself in order to find these cancer-fighting bioactives.
Well, for those of us who can drink alcohol, of course, we don't want to do it excessively. The evidence for that is just absolutely overwhelming. But we might want to get the biggest bang for our buck.
Sure.
We will, the highest anti-cancer potency in our red wines from red grapes. Is it true that Cabernet Sauvignons are higher in anti-cancer potency than other varieties, and particularly than Petite Sirahs?
Yeah, so you're asking sort of the Robert Parker of science question, right? You're saying you go into a wine store and you're looking at all these, hundreds of wines that you could actually buy, and there's a rating next to each wine, and the rating, sometimes a higher rating means a higher cost per bottle, but somebody's actually judged something about the quality of the wine. Well, I'll tell you what we're doing at the Angiogenesis Foundation. We've dove in and created some partnerships with some wineries. Same soil, same terroir. The only difference are the different varietals of grapes, and they're making the wine. And we're actually studying what makes the difference between one wine versus another after it's in the bottle and after it's ready to be served. So what we're finding is really interesting. We are finding that, in fact, absolutely correct, that Cabernet Sauvignon and Cabernet Franc wines, grape varietals, actually have a huge amount of anti-angiogenic activity. But they're not the only ones. In fact, if you take a look at the body of research that's out there, not only do Cabernet grapes have resveratrol and other bioactives, another type of grape that's actually quite good, and I have to remark, quite tasty as wine, is Pinot Noir. Now, Pinot Noir actually has some of the highest levels of resveratrol for any grape. And so the question is, why? Why Pinot Noir? So it turns out that Pinot Noir grapes tend to grow in slightly humid areas. And remember, I was remarking on the fact that Mother Nature or evolution, during evolution, some of these bioactives, like resveratrol, evolved to really defend the plant. Well, it turns out resveratrol is a natural fungicide that prevents Pinot Noir grapes from developing a grape disease called noble rot. This was actually a big problem for winemakers when they were growing fields of grapes, and they would actually get this fungus on them and ruin them. It turns out the Pinot Noir grapes have a lot of resveratrol that resists that fungus. So again, this is not just about, health food stores and people trying to write cookbooks and, give health advice. I think that if you go back to science, if you go back to nature and really ask the question, why is it that these molecules exist, it gives us better clues and gives us a better appreciation of why eating fresh whole foods is good for you.
As I listen to you, I get the feeling that foods could help us start a new war against cancer.
Right. Well, listen, I think that the traditional war against cancer was ignited in the early 1970s by Richard Nixon signing a presidential decree. The National Cancer Act was the official war against cancer. And what came out of that? Chemotherapy. Now, chemotherapy is actually very important as one of the tools that oncologists use, doctors use in order to be able to beat cancer. And, there are cancers that can be cured with chemotherapy, so we cannot take that fact lightly. And as an aside, what's really interesting, John, is the history of chemotherapy. There was, the first chemotherapies were mustard gases that were being hidden in a warship that was illegally parked in Italy during World War II. And when the Germans bombed the Italian town of Bari and accidentally hit this warship, they released the toxins out, killed tons of soldiers and sailors, and also killed lots of people in the town. But a few cancer patients survived. And they were asking, how is it that this poison, which was later called chemotherapy, could have actually not killed the cancer patients? And it turned out that it killed their cancer. So the war against cancer literally had its roots from a treatment perspective in real wars with real weapons. What we're talking about now with food is a completely different type of approach. I wouldn't even call it a war. I would say that it's really a winning approach to keeping us healthy by not having to go to war. It's a peace approach. It's a diplomat's approach. We can neutralize the enemy without ever having to pull out a nasty weapon, and that's really because we have to eat food 3 times a day. That's over 1,000 choices of meals that we make a year, and if we have that knowledge about which foods contain bioactives and what types of cancers that they can actually reduce. And that's one of the whole points of this Eat to Beat program that we developed, to connect people with simple tips and the information that they can help to choose from. It's a free sign up, eattobeat.org, through my nonprofit organization. It's a community of people over 40 countries. There's more than 50,000 people that are all passionate about food and interested in making choices, lifestyle choices to help defeat cancer. This is really, I think, the approach. So let's not think about it as a war against cancer. Let's call it really sort of a peacetime approach to maintaining health. And so one of the things that we are really committed to doing is offering people who join Eat to Beat, an e-cookbook, a digital cookbook with cancer-fighting recipes, easy, simple, convenient, that really also take the best of science and put them in the hands of people that can take it out to their shopping, their grocery store, or just put it on their counter and make cooking decisions with it, breakfast, lunch, or dinner.
Well, listening to you talk is such a pleasure. Eat to beat, indeed, and you give new meaning to the old saying that food is a medicine we take 3 times a day, and you help us to understand what we can do, the lifestyle choices we can make, the food choices we can make to reduce our risk for cancer and other diseases, to live healthy lives filled with vitality and vibrancy and the capacity to really to fulfill the purposes for which we're here on this earth. It's really a joy to bring your message, your voice to our audience. And I, on behalf of Ocean and on myself and really everyone involved in the Food Revolution Network, I want to thank you, Will, for your work and for being with us today.
Well, it's really my pleasure. It is a terrific honor to be speaking with you and to be able to communicate my, the research that we've been doing and what my nonprofit organization is leading the charge. I think that it is truly a food revolution. And it's time for us to take back our health and make it possible from childhood to healthy aging, something that everybody can look forward to as opposed to run from. Food should be something that we enjoy in order to be healthy rather than something that we avoid from a disease perspective. So I have my kind of closing is enjoy your life, enjoy your food, know what you're putting in your body, and protect your health.
Absolutely beautiful. We've been talking with Dr. William Li, founding president of the Angiogenesis Foundation and creator of the Eat to Defeat Cancer program. Will, your research and understanding the role of anti-angiogenesis in cancer protection is exhilarating. Your leadership in helping us to all understand and implement your findings could save millions of lives. We're so grateful for your research, for your wisdom, and for your partnership in the food revolution.
Thank you, John and Ocean.
Thank you so much to Dr. William Li and to my dad and colleague John Robbins for that practical, tangible, specific, and powerful conversation. Dr. Li told us he said, enjoy your life, enjoy your food, know what you're putting into your body, and protect your health. What simple, clear, and useful insight. If you want to express your opinions on what you've been hearing, and if you want to find out what other people are saying, post and engage in the comments section at the bottom of our broadcasts page. Make sure to refresh those comments using the refresh button so you can see the most recent comments that have been submitted. And now I'm going to share and respond to some of the questions and comments that have been coming in here. We heard from Irka Dorsch, who said it would be wonderful to spread this information to the masses. How many lives would be impacted in a positive way? As a teacher of health, these resources would be so valuable in order to spread the word exponentially and improve lives. Too many people allow their doctors to control their health. They are unaware of the amazing healing abilities that the body can perform as long as it gets what it needs. Mostly a healthy organic diet. Help me to spread the word. Well, thank you, Irka, for spreading the word, for learning, for growing, for sharing, for eating. You know, we are part of the food revolution every day of our lives, 3 times a day with the meals that we sit down to eat, but even more often with the conversations we have, with the vitality with which we live, with, of course, the purchasing choices we make, with how we plan and prepare our foods, and with what we bring into our consciousness and our minds. So thank you for learning, and thank you for sharing. We had a lot of questions that come up about oils and tomatoes. Specifically, Jamie Seklecki, forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your last name. Jamie Seklecki said, could you clarify about cooking tomatoes? I thought Dr. Fuhrman said it's best not to heat oils, but Dr. Li discussed to get the best nutrition from tomatoes was to cook them in olive oil. Is it okay to heat certain oils? Well, Jamie, I think the core issue here is that Dr. Fuhrman was talking about oil. And there's a lot of data indicating that bottled oils, and especially cooked bottled oils, are not associated with positive health impacts. So I think Dr. Fuhrman is correct that this minimizing consumption of oils, and especially cooked oils, is a good thing. The focus of Dr. Li's comment was on tomatoes, and in this case specifically on cooked tomatoes. Dr. Li referenced cooking tomatoes with olive oil, and I think his comment might have been misconstrued by some people to be sounding like an endorsement of cooking with oil. But I think the core of his message here was specifically about cooking tomatoes. The tomato is the primary food source of lycopene. It's a naturally occurring pigment linked to the prevention of cancer and other chronic diseases. And, lycopene gives tomatoes their red color. It acts as an antioxidant in the body. And consuming high levels of lycopene has been linked to reduced risk of heart disease and certain types of cancer. According to research that was published in the Journal of Agriculture and Food Chemistry, cooking tomatoes for 2 minutes boosts lycopene levels by 6%. Cooking them for 15 minutes boosts them by 17%. And cooking them for a half hour boosts lycopene levels in tomatoes by 35%. It may also be that cooking them in oil is associated with even higher levels of increase in lycopene levels. I think that eating cooked tomatoes can be a very good step to take. And the point here is that there's something special about tomatoes, not that bottled oils are a health food. And I've got my dad, John Robbins, here to share a couple other words on this topic as well.
One of the things that's so wonderful about tomatoes, of course, is the lycopene, but there's a lot of other remarkable nutrients in tomatoes that also, like lycopene, are fat soluble. And that's why, and this is Dr. William Li's point, if you add some heated olive oil to the cooked tomatoes, you enhance your absorption of those important nutrients. Dr. Fuhrman was warning against the consumption of too much olive oil or actually any bottled oil, and The reason those two things can seem to be conflicting is one saying, well, watch out on the oil, the olive oil, and the other saying, oh, it's good. The point is, it's good in moderation. You don't need very much olive oil to provide the enhancement of the absorption that you want from having the oil, the fat-soluble nutrients more readily metabolized in your body. So a little bit is good, and a lot isn't.
We heard from Emma Reyes, who said, Dr. Fuhrman says flax seeds are good for fighting breast cancer, but flaxseed is the number one highest estrogen promoter, so breast cancer patients who are estrogen dominant should not take it. This was advice given to me by my niece, who is a chiropractor. Please advise. Well, Emma, I'm not aware of any studies ever conducted that have correlated flaxseed consumption with negative impacts relative to breast cancer. And in fact, to the contrary, flax seeds are high in lignans. Lignans are similar to the female hormone estrogen. So similar, in fact, that they compete with estrogen for a part in certain chemical reactions. As a result, natural estrogens seem to become less powerful in the body, and some researchers believe that lignans might be able to slow down the progress of certain breast cancers and other types of cancer that need estrogen in order to thrive. So some people use flaxseed with the intent to lower their risk of getting weak bones, osteoporosis, and also to protect against breast cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer, and prostate cancer. And there is a body of medical research to back this up. If you're going to eat flaxseed, though, you can't just eat the whole seed because they are too tough to be digested. So they're literally going to come out the other end whole. So the best method may be to grind your flaxseed with a coffee grinder, or you can buy it pre-ground and sprinkle it on your food. We heard from Sherry Phelan, who said these research-based interviews have been phenomenal. Thank you for sharing this important research and perspective. Well, thank you so much, Sherry. We do it for you and for everybody who is hungry to learn, engage, and participate in this food revolution, because our health is such a precious thing, and we're taking it back. We're taking charge of it. Thank goodness. We heard from Choki Dawa, who said, what I love about the summit is there is so much information I've never heard before. Life-saving information. Thank you. And we heard from Yuli Ray, who said, this is a must to share to educate the people of the world on how to take charge of their health to live longer, happy, and free of disease. A big hug to all the doctors, coordinators, and all the participants who made this presentation for all of humanity to change their way of eating and living. Thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Well, Yuli, thank you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for engaging, and thank you for sharing. Now, one of the people I feel so lucky that we get to work with in the food revolution is Karen Hart-Glass. She's the founder of Responsible Eating and Living, or REAL, and she's the co-teacher, along with my dad and I, of our wildly popular course, Plant-Powered and Thriving. Her passion is in making healthy eating doable, practical, and delicious. On each day of this summit, you get to hear Karen introducing a recipe of the day, and you can find that recipe on our broadcast page, linked right there. So now I'm going to hand it over to Karen for our revolutionary recipe of the day.
Hi, Ocean. Hi, everybody. Wow, this is an amazing summit. The message we heard from today's speakers and will continue to hear throughout the summit is the importance of eating a whole food plant-based diet, right? Dr. Turner said about 70% of cancers are preventable if you eat a whole foods, plant-strong diet filled with lots of fresh veggies, some fruits, seeds, nuts, and legumes, very low in processed foods, and low in meat, dairy, and sugar. Dr. William Lee just talked about those isothiocyanates in green leafy vegetables that are so protective against cancer. There are many ways to eat fresh veggies and those green leafy vegetables, and one of the most obvious to me is in salad. Today's recipe is a fantastic eat the rainbow kind of salad, and it comes with one of my favorite dressings, which I'll talk about in a moment. In this salad, everyone gets to choose the ingredients they like. The lettuce can be red lettuce, green lettuce, romaine, butter lettuce, and then You get to add to it arugula, radicchio, red or green cabbage, cucumber, carrots, bell peppers, tomatoes, corn, beets, olives, green onions, and parsley. It's up to you. The key is to chop everything up into bite-sized pieces so that all the flavors mix beautifully together in your mouth. And while you are enjoying these flavors, don't forget to chew. Chew a lot. Enjoy the deliciousness as long as you can in your mouth. A good part of the digestive process starts in the mouth if you let it happen. Dr. Lee explained the importance of chewing the vegetables to crush the plant cells and release chemicals that are stored there, like glucosinolates and myrosinase. Myrosinase digests the glucosinolates, and the result is the isocyanate. You don't have to think about any of that. All you have to do is chew. And this is a wonderful salad to enjoy chewing. Now, what about that dressing? Dr. Fuhrman discussed the results of a study where when people switched from consuming butter to olive oil, their heart disease rates dropped 30%. And then going from olive oil to nuts and seeds, the heart disease rates dropped another 35%. He stressed that nuts and seeds have qualities and nutrients not contained in oils, and the nuts and seeds facilitate the absorption of the phytochemical or beneficial compounds that are found in the fruits and vegetables, the greens. They have such profound and widespread beneficial effects compared to oil. That's why the salad dressing recipe I am sharing with you today is made with sunflower seeds and no oil. It's rich, creamy, delicious, and good for you. We make it all the time at home. Store it in a jar in the refrigerator and use it up in about 4 or 5 days. I hope you will try this salad and dressing and make it a part of your repertoire of meals at home. Just don't forget to chew.
Thanks so much, Karen, for that wonderful reminder and for that wonderful recipe. We heard from Tiffany Tucker, who said, "I love how specific these findings are. So helpful. As I start out in this plant-based journey for me and my family, I love the specifics." Well, Tiffany, I'm so glad that you're finding the specifics valuable, and we want to support your family on your plant-based journey, on your whole foods journey, on your food revolution journey. So you are this segment's empowerment package recipient. We would love to share it with you, and I know you will put it to good use. Our team will be in touch with you, and we will get that to you. And you're going to have the MP3s and the transcripts of this entire Food Revolution Summit, plus more than $2,600 worth of life-giving, health-boosting bonuses from our speakers and partners, completely for free. So congratulations. And congratulations also to all the other people who have recently stepped up in the last little while to get the empowerment package, including Vicky from Florida, Caroline from North Carolina, Fran from Alabama, John from California, Connie from Oregon, Edward from California, Mona from Sweden, and Donald from Wisconsin. You all are going to have it for life, and you can share it with friends and loved ones. Congratulations. And congratulations to everybody else who is participating in this summit right here, right now. You are helping to shift the course of food history for your life and for our entire world. As we are going to be wrapping up shortly, I want to make sure everybody knows that you're going to find all of today's broadcasts on replay, starting as soon as we wrap up today, at foodrevolutionsummit.org/replays. And each day of the summit, that will be the case. We'll have 21 hours of replay after each day's broadcasts wrap up until the next day begins at foodrevolution.summit.org/replays. And of course, if you get the empowerment package, then you own everything for life. We heard from Maya Amar, who said, "This is the best summit ever, and it's only the second day. I can feel the momentum in our revolution building. Everyone should be sharing this with people they love." Well, thank you, Maya, so much. I'm excited. I know you're excited. A lot of us are excited. Let's share this. Let's spread this. This summit is generating an absolutely tremendous response. And I want you all to know right here, right now, you are part of a global community of more than 225,000 people now who are stepping up and activating this food revolution. So participate and join. You can express your opinions and find out what other people are saying in the comments section at the bottom of the broadcast page. You can also join in the conversation on our Facebook page, which we encourage you to like, and which is at facebook.com/Food Revolution Network. Make sure to come back and join us tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Time, 11 Eastern, 3 p.m. GMT. We're going to focus on, is your food safe? Where your food comes from, and why it matters. You're going to discover some very powerful presentations from Dr. Vandana Shiva on GMOs and seeds of hope and justice, from Nathan Runkle on how mercy for animals can transform your life, and from Saru Jayaraman on why ethical dining matters to you. So please come back and join us tomorrow, and in the meanwhile, you can post your comments and share in the conversation. You can listen to the replays at foodrevolutionsummit.org/replays. You can check out the empowerment package. You can invite your friends, family, and loved ones to join in. And you can also enjoy some delicious, fabulous, healthy food. We wish you a beautiful, thriving day. This is Ocean Robbins, signing off from day 2 of the Food Revolution Summit.